What is up, everybody? This is Silver Spook, and this is the Silver Spook live stream. And today we will be talking about Resident Evil. I'm gonna try to not show any zombies specifically because I know some people are, including our mod Holly is not doesn't do well with that. So we are gonna be talking about Resident Evil, the show, just generally and around it, um, and also weaponized disease specifically in the context of the brand new Netflix show, which I have not watched the entirety of. But I'm not really. This is mostly not going to concern specifically the plot of the show, so don't worry about if you haven't seen it. And it's been getting a lot of. It's always like interesting when I watch people reviewing shows and seeing why and how shows are getting reviewed. Resident Evil has been getting a lot of not good press. Reboot is a teetering mess. From IndieWire. And then Resident Evil is. Oh, that's just a recap. Let's see what. Yeah, if you just like Google it, it's not good. Resident Evil is zombie poop. I don't know if that's good. I'm guessing that's bad. Uh, it's plagued by predictability. Wesker steals a show that lacks bite. So that's not good. But anyways, yeah, just we'll get to that. But yeah, I just wanted to talk about just as a jumping off point though. I've only watched the first episode. I have played a lot of these games when I was growing up. I played a lot of Resident Evil on PlayStation 1. It was a terrifying game. Terrifying game with 2.5D. You just like walking around. I'm not gonna show pictures of it because I know it's got zombies in it. But Resident Evil 1 is a PlayStation game where you were walking around in about 200 polygon, like very very like one slightly more polygons than a Minecraft character. Animated characters walking around awkwardly. This is pre mocap and days where you could actually capture the motions of a human with special cameras, etc. And so Resident Evil 1 was a very scary game because it was hard to control, and there were zombies and other horrible creatures coming out of walls and dogs jumping through windows, and it was the difficulty of the controls actually made it more scary, and the kind of just being stuck in the camera angles. In this, you have still image backgrounds with a simple character. It seems like it shouldn't be that scary, but it actually was pretty terrifying. And then Silent Hill came after that. Anyways, but that's just random game aside. It's not what this is about. Oh, good. My internet seems to be working. Yeah, thankfully the rain has stopped. We're having a major storm right now. But anyways, yeah. So Resident Evil and weaponized disease, though. But the central plot of the show is if you don't know that much about Resident Evil, I'm gonna see if I can get something that just gives me like the plot of it. Resident Evil. I don't want the whole recap. Yeah, Resident Evil is a show where you have this corporation umbrella that is using is a biotech corporation. I think in Japan the game was called Biohazard originally. And so the Umbrella operatives are kicking butt, and then there's twin teen protagonists, Jade and Billy, who are trying to live their life. That part's very interesting. But they're kind of I don't want to give too much away, but they're kind of trying to live their life in a very unusual town with a lot of under construction buildings. And I'm not that far along with it, but they're going to. It actually begins. Let me see that Resident Evil, Jade and Billy. So in the beginning, in the town. Let me see if I can not get something terrifying here. Yeah. So Jade and Billy are living in this weird town where all the buildings are white. That's one thing you look at it. It's like, why is everything so like jarringly jarringly scarily like plain and like sterile. and it's kind of, you know what it looks like. It kind of looks like. Let me see if I can get Jilly Billy. New Raccoon City is that what the that if you know anything about Resident Evil, you're gonna know what when we're talking about that what that means. But you know, I'll see if I can get the whole city. New Raccoon City aerial view. Shoot. Okay, I can't. Really, I'm not gonna be able to get it. Anyways, so it's kind of like they're in this town that's like everything's just brand new built, under construction. They're just trying to live their life. There's a bunch of quarantines happening, right? So it kind of starts with like you're in this really weird place, and then you've got suddenly there's some kind of you're not it's quite certain what it is, but there's some kind of viral, bacterial, plague. You know, there's some kind of disease-related isolation. The Billy character kind of incidentally looks a lot like Billie Eilish. Has to go into quarantine, right? Or is kind of supposed to be in quarantine, and the dad is there. You know, I don't want to give away. Actually, the dad. I don't want to give away who the dad is either. But the dad is, you know, is trying to keep the kids in place. But they're like, no, I don't want to be in quarantine. I want to go out. So number one, don't break quarantine. But it's like we're gonna go out. We're gonna go to a party. I can't just be stuck at home. We're gonna go to this big and then there's a scene. Let's see if I can get a picture of that. Resident Evil skateboarding scene. They go to this like scene where the Resident Evil Netflix. Where is it? Okay. Sorry, I'm trying trying to get the party scene. I might not be able to find it. Yeah, I'm probably not gonna be able to find it. That's okay. You know, so they're like hanging out. They're going to this like party in this just weird. It's like all these buildings are just like randomly going up. There's like steel girders and there's all these like painting platforms. There's all this exposed rebar and concrete everywhere, and they make like and the kids, the young teenagers have made like a little skateboarding ramp for the you know to like skateboarding down, like diving off onto this pad, and so that, you know, they're just like, you know, actually give me 1 second, I'll be right back. They're trying to live their life, you know, and it kind of, you know, it's kind of like in the time of COVID, right? In the time of COVID, it's, you know, it's really resonant. I mean, I was talking to Holly. There's not a lot of shows that are like really dealing with the reality that we're currently in. Like, there's a lot of TV shows that are like living in the past in this moment. They're like pretending like COVID doesn't exist. Like all the Marvel stuff obviously doesn't. It's all in its own alternate reality where the U.S. is still doing great, everything's fine. There's the climate, the economic, the political, the COVID, everything is not really hitting. You know, the Scarlet Witch and Doctor Strange and all the you know there's a little bit in Falcon and Winter Soldier, but it's barely touched. It's more like there might be a little bit of racism maybe, but I don't really know what's happening. It's a very like upper middle class white New Yorkers' deluded fantasy of what they think the world and America is like and New York is like. Even they can't, like, they're not paying attention to like the mass disease, the mass pandemic, the mass collapse, you know, the mass everything happening, you know, the mass outrage, economic, racial, etc. And so you know, and then, you know, a lot of those shows, right? You just have the biggest problem is interdimensional travelers. The biggest problem is like women might want too much power. That was a Scarlet Witch or something. Or women are dangerous. The biggest problem is Thanos. I don't know, space aliens, right? The biggest problem is nothing wrong with the United. That's why I dunk on all the Marvel all the time and Disney generally. By the way, they're making a Lilo and Stitch film, and that's terrible. Instead of just a quick little aside since I'm on that briefly. They're planning to make a Lilo and Stitch live action movie. So, but you know, instead of making a Lilo and Stitch instead of a bunch of white Disney, Democrat imperialists making more movies in illegally occupied Hawaii, how about U.S. corporations stop using Hawaii as while poisoning our water, stealing our land, destroying our universal healthcare system, mass incarcerating our kids, making us all homeless, and the most police murdered, most incarcerated of all ethnicities, Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islanders. Why don't the U.S. stop occupying us and stop making movies, culturally appropriating our entire islands before we don't exist? It's just a tip for Disney generally. So yeah, I know they're not gonna listen because they don't listen to people of color. They just make movies about them. So anyways, but anyway, back to Resident Evil. So and I mean what's the other movies Multiverse of Madness, like I just said, it's not dealing with reality. It's living in fantasy land. I mean, the best thing I like about it is all the Sam Raimi stuff. I've already kind of talked about that. I think I've talked about that in some previous streams. What else is coming out? All of the Marvel, especially anything Avengers related, right? It's very much the U.S. has to go out. We have to save the world, the U.S. and New York's greatest heroes, and the U.S. military and the police, right? And billionaire philanthropists, arms dealer playboys like Iron Man, and the U.S. military represented by Captain America, save the world from bad things, right? As opposed to, they basically don't have any problems except maybe they fight each other in civil war sometime. But other than that, we're pretty good, And so, and also it's not, these none of these are really dealing with the pandemic. I think Shameless is one show. I haven't actually watched it. Holly has watched a lot more of that, but Shameless is one show that actually deals with the pandemic. I think this year was the last season, and main characters are all dying from the pandemic because guess what? 60, 70, 80-year-olds are dying and no one's wearing masks, and it deals with that. At least there's a very small, tiny little selection of shows that are trying to address just even thinking about addressing reality. Everyone else is living in escapist, Stranger Things, I mean, I love Stranger Things, but Stranger Things, like I've already said, I love Eddie, but Stranger Things is anti-black, anti-communist, Cold War, as I made a whole stream just about, it's about the eternal childhood of the liberal American mind living in 1980s or 1960s or whatever historical period you thought was the best, right? Back when we had the good guys and bad guys, the Soviet Union, communist versus capitalist America, and we're all cherishing our USS Butterscotches in our malls versus, so this is all childish stuff, it's, and all the young kids are it's interesting listening to some of the young actors. They're I don't really identify with a lot of the things in this show because this is all from someone else's childhood. Not even the Duffers' childhood. They're 36. They were 1 year old, in cradles when a lot of this nostalgia that they ostensibly have is happening. It's like surrogate nostalgia of their older brothers. So, but and so, which is fine. I mean, I love the Goonies. I love 80s shows. I love 90s stuff, obviously. But it's also we also have to deal with the present that we're in, right? So anyway, so coming back to Resident Evil, so one thing I liked about it is that and one reason why I think a lot of people who are fans of the Resident Evil series didn't like or are just immediately had this bad taste in their mouth, it is similar to I believe it's similar to the Terminator Dark Fate effect, and let me see if I can find that. This is like a 3-year-old video, so I might not be able to find it, but let me see if I can find it. I think it's similar to the Terminator Dark Fate effect. In Terminator Dark Fate, if you recall, the Terminator is the show. I'm not gonna be able to find it. It's 3 years old. Okay. Terminator Dark Fate. Let me just is a show that begins in Mexico. The first third to a half of this entire show, right, it also has one of the main characters, non-binary character. So like most of the characters are women or non-men characters. It's basically the only main dude characters are robots. Actually, there's actually no main men characters. You call it Arnold, but Arnold is technically, he's got nothing between his legs. He's a robot. Or he has phallomimetic organic tissue between endoskeletal thighs. I don't know if that counts. Anyways, so you have the character that's most like Sarah Connor, the new Sarah Connor is actually a Mexican, a non-white Mexican girl, like not even a Mexican American, right? I mean, just actually interesting contrast. You can tell I love just like I'm a multiverse traveler. I just like punching holes between cinematic universes. There's a character called America, right? There's a character called America. This is the character, right? In Multiverse of Madness, and America is a Hispanic girl, but she's she's literally wearing an American flag jeans jacket, and she is like star spangled for the duration of the show, and she punches stars and stripes, like when she like punches holes between multiverse instantiations, and the portals are shaped like American stars. It's almost like, it's like they're like aircraft carriers in the sense that that's where America punches holes between international borders and just like comes into your country and brings U.S. soldiers that are carrying mountains of COVID-19, like in Okinawa, Hawaii, and Guam, and it gives everyone death. So that's like she punches holes into other people's national borders and then dumps, PFAS and F-35 jet fuel in your water, right? So that's the it's like punch, so she really does represent America in that sense. But anyway, back to my point, which is that like the character is nothing but like in Stranger Things, where there's a young black girl, right? Stranger Things, Erica, American flag. In Stranger Things, right? Just another white liberal dude, upper crust perspective. You have the main, most like visible, one of the most visible non-white characters, one of the very few. I'm going to be talking about this soon. In Stranger Things, is a young black girl wearing American flag, praising American capitalism as the best system ever, and I want my USS Butterscotch, and I'm going to be a CEO boss. I'm going to make a lot of money in America. It's the best country in the world. And Russia is terrible, and then evil Russians are conspiring under the malls of America in Hawkins, Indiana, right? So anyways, so my point is that like that, like this is not deal. Is that where most Black Americans are? I mean, I don't know if there's any Black people in America in this stream, but I don't get the sense that that's where most Black people and people of color generally in the United States are at. They're kind of like, fuck this. Actually, the average American adult, the actual people who, when asked, are you proud to be an American? It's dropped from like 50-something% to like less than 40. It's like 2/3 of America almost. American adults are not proud and happy to say they're American. And it's even less than that when it comes to non-white people who are mass incarcerated and mass murdered by the police and 10 times poorer than the white families, Black families. So this is out of touch with reality, right? What this is about trying to get Black people to shut up and go home and not do Black Lives Matter and stop doing the action they need to actually have a planet, actually, and also have a actual justice and actual livable, dignified anything, like any kind of life. So this show, I mean, you see what I'm trying to say is like this Stranger Things is, and even in that time, this is not where Black people were either. As far as people of color generally, that's not where people were. Certainly, I mean, and there's a kind of cop out that I was saying, which is that when you make historical, I was talking to Professor Flowers about this. When you make historical fiction, when you make shows, you can do this thing, because some people are saying, well, it was the 1980s and it was a Cold War, so we're just making it's not that Stranger Things is pro-capitalist, anti-communist, American propaganda. It's just that it's made in the Cold War, and that's just the politics of the time. And everything was like that. Number one, it wasn't not as blatant as like literal Russians stealing your mall, like inside the Russian bases in America. It's kind of, if anything, it was the other way. It's like U.S. aggressing across the rest of the world. So no, there was one Red Dawn, but I mean that's like super blatant propaganda. Not that everything in Hollywood isn't propaganda, but I mean it's anyway. So number one, it's like things were not like that. Number two, there's a cop out which just says that like because we're making it's like because it's made in 1980s and it was a lot more anti-communist and a lot more pro-capitalist. So we're just going to make a show about that. It's kind of like saying, well, it's okay for me to make propaganda because I'm just making a show in the 70s. And there were lots of pro-cop stuff in the 70s. Not that there isn't now, but I mean, it was much more, there's much less pushback than now, right? When people are realizing, oh my God, why is 50% of or more shows about main characters are sympathetic cops, black cops, white cops, Hispanic cops. Brooklyn Nine-Nine got every kind of cop, comedy cops, serious cops, space cops, sci-fi cops like X-Files, fantasy cops like the Torchwood, you got all the Paw Patrol kid cops, dog cops, right? And then it's like, oh, and the police are mass murderers and mass incarcerators, and Uvalde cops are standing around looking at their phone while everyone's getting shot with their Punisher logos. And it's like, but anyway, so the point is that like, you can make it'd be like somebody saying we can go back and make a pro cop show because it's set in the 1960s and 70s, and that's just the historical time period. So, but you're also making pro cop while cops are literally solving less crimes than they're actually committing, and also getting massive bloated budgets and letting all the children die in all the schools. And also killing thousands of innocent people here. They don't need any more proper propaganda. They got enough of it, right? U.S. cops specifically. They don't need any more of that. But oh no, it's okay because I'm doing historical. Anyway, so you see my point. I'm gonna unwind this because I gotta move on to Resident Evil. But the shows that are made about the 1950s, 60s, 70s, 80s, historical shows about the United States are not helpful. I would argue, actually. They're actually detrimental, especially when they're not actually, dealing with the even if you do make a historical period show about some other time in American history other than the present, if they're not like critical of the things that are happening there and speaking to the issues of the present, they're less than useless. They're actually making it detrimental to the collective consciousness and the changes that need to be made in places like the United States. So anyway. So coming back to the present though, so that's where like this show where black girls are like just loving America and just loving all of their brothers getting mass incarcerated and themselves getting abused by the American system. This is nonsense, and that's part of Stranger Things that we're going to talk about soon with Professor Flowers and some other folks in a panel coming up possibly in a couple weeks. And then in Multiverse of Madness this is white upper class liberals putting star-spangled clothes and words into people of color's working class people of color's mouths. That's what Marvel shows and Stranger Things is. I mean, when it comes to their own experiences, I mean, it's like, yeah, it's the normal white privileged experience. But I mean, the other stuff is like, no, this is not how it is though. So anyway, so back to Resident Evil though. So in Resident Evil, right? So the thing that I like about it, and why did I bring up Why am I bring up Dark Fate, and then these other shows? Because in Terminator Dark Fate, people didn't like it, and this is a wider point that goes back to when I was talking about Riddick too, which is that people didn't like. I think a lot of reasons why people did not like Dark Fate, even though they're not going to admit it, especially American audiences and Western audiences, is that Dark Fate spent 40 plus minutes speaking Spanish and speaking Spanish, as I said, not just like somewhere in California, You know, like, oh, yo, like they say, yo quiero Taco Bell, man, in Stranger Things, but it's a cute little thing, right? It's like the one Mexican kid. I mean, and this is not like a criticism of the kid, right? Like, Stranger Things, long-haired pizza guy, you know, Eduardo Franco, right? In Stranger Things, this character, you know, he says some Spanish in the show, right? But it's also it's a white middle class dude looking at Mexicans, right, and going, "Ha, look at that, man! You're stoned and you're like delivering pizza, man. Yeah." And the Mexican's like, "Yeah, like I don't like getting rounded up by the cops and getting fucking, you know, accused of all kind of crimes I didn't do, man. And also living in poverty with my grandma, my grandpa, abuelita, and all my cousins, man. That sucks, actually. I don't want to be your cute Mexican," right? It's like Kim's Convenience, right? Look at the funny Asians running the convenience store. It's, you know, look at the black girl. Black girl just like loves giving a lip, talking all, oh, look at that. She's giving us some lip now, wearing American flag. That's not the actual experiences of those people. That's not it, you know, like, I'm a stoner dude, but I'm Mexican, right? Like, this is white privilege looking down at other people and writing characters, stories, and lines for them. It's also 40-year-olds, 36, 40-year-old privileged dudes giving actors that are, because I don't know what all these actors, if that, you know, what they actually want to act, you know. A lot of actors in the Duffers made a lot of people kiss who didn't want to do it just because like they felt like doing it. There's lots of really maybe these two characters shouldn't get together because not everybody is straight, and it's like, you know, but I mean that's a thing of that's a thing of the people that are ages today of 15 to 25. They have a different reality than you know. In Stranger Things is a show set in the 80s, so it is what it is. But it's also the 80s from a certain group of people's perspective, and so anyway. So Dark Fate is another show that doesn't take the perspective, right? It starts in Mexico. Let me see. Dark Fate, Mexico plant. In Terminator Dark Fate, the show starts in Mexico. One of the main characters is working in a power plant. Like, this is one of the Terminator in Dark Fate shows up in the plant. But the Mexican not that one. I got too many. So the Mexican girl on the left, right? She is a worker at the plant, but she is like representing. She's like I forgot her exact position, but she's kind of like a union leader type who is like representing the complaints and grievances of all the workers at this auto plant, right? Where the Terminator eventually shows up and, you know, an action happens. And so interestingly, this is in a time when there's a lot of complaints that Americans are using. You know, Donald Trump ran on all of the illegal, like the white wing always does. The Republicans run on, the white man party runs on, you know, South Central Americans. These Mexicans, they're coming across the border, taking our jobs. They're coming into our suburbs, taking our women, right? Taking my house and my lawn. They're taking my jobs. And Trump, Republicans are constantly winning on this, right? And Trump wins, and even Biden runs on this. He ran on it, and he still runs on it to an extent, not as directly, but he's like, we're gonna, you know, it's like Clinton was like, we gotta run to the right and be anti-immigration because we at least gotta say anti-immigration stuff because we're not getting enough votes to win elections anymore. That was the Democrats for the last 10 years. So anyway, my point is that, like, you know, there's a lot of sentiment of like, we have to be tough on immigration, which basically means keep America white, stop the illegals from coming in to give into the racist, settler, colonial, white American desires and racism. And the Mexicans are coming in and taking our jobs, right? The Mexicans are taking our jobs. And then there's a little bit more about robots might take our jobs, but mostly it's the racist, you know, people from the global south are going to come in and take my jobs and take my stuff. And the Democrats are colluding with the immigrants to get themselves elected. And then Mexicans are going to replace us, right? The brown people are going to replace us, right? These immigrants from all over the place, the Muslims are going to come and blow us up. and Mexicans are going to come in and replace us, and the black people are going to come out of their cities and replace us. A lot of zombie movies are actually about fear of urban, non-white, and more socially, queer, etc., educated people coming out, but especially the black and brown people coming out of the suburbs and coming out of the cities, urban cities, and invading your suburbs. That's why Detroit fell apart, right? It's because all the white flight. And then, well, we don't care about black people's cities, so let's just let that thing collapse. So, but then like that fear of the white fear of black and brownness inside of the United States is like subverted in this show. It's at least it's an attempt to, by going like, maybe Mexicans are also afraid in Mexico about their own jobs being supplanted by robots, right? Which, not just because there are worse paying, but there's still jobs, but they're still worse paying than the United States. Jobs in making air conditioners and cars and machinery and trucks, etc. in Mexico. But still, those jobs are also threatened by automation and robotics and artificial intelligence. Obviously, the Terminator is an artificially intelligent, sentient robot coming to, kill through a time machine, the future leader of the free human world out from under the robot overlords. But anyways, so the robot, it's Terminator Dark Fate. What I'm trying to get at is Terminator Dark Fate is about trying to subvert the expectations of the American and Western audience, right? And particularly like this centering of the white dude and the American person generally, afraid of the jobs they could lose to unskilled laborers, which is code for non-white people who don't speak English good. It's a racist term that's about maintaining suppressed wages based on racial. I was talking about last week, racial and ethnic divisions. Of course, women. We're talking about Elliot Page versus Jordan Peterson. Right, and the divisions between genders, care work is lesser work than white man work, and unskilled brown and black labor is lesser work than white man labor, right? But there's this bogus thing where you don't want to do, Americans won't do agricultural jobs. No, you just are racist and you want underpaid, under the table, illegal immigrants who you can make do $3 an hour, and if they try to unionize, you call ICE. No, everyone should be paid equally and a dignified wage enough to live, whatever job they do, whatever gender, race, etc. But America's a racist, sexist shithole. So, anyways, but that's what the show was about. Going like, what do you ever think about what in Terminator Dark Fate? Do you ever think about what it was like in Mexico for those people who also have their own fear, economic fears, technological fears, right? And that, so my point is that like that aspect of it, where in Dark Fate you have an old lady, an old robot dude. There's actually no dudes by that. There's actually no dudes in this show. There's only robots in the face of an anthropological Mr. Universe, and old, and then you have non-binary people and women, and one of them's old. And the main character is Mexican, so it's very based in that sense. But so and you start in Mexico. You don't start in America. You start in Mexico, right? It has the Pan's Labyrinth effect, which is like, and Holly can tell you in the white areas like of the U.S. and Canada. Lots and lots and lots of people were like, oh, I really want to see this really cool, Guillermo del Toro movie with fantasy effects. It looks really cool. And then, I can't watch it because it's in Spanish. I don't want to read subtitles. Right? Like huge swaths of the audiences just refuse to watch it because it's just racist and American exceptionalism and white supremacy. Period. It's not really any other explanation for it. It's a really good movie. Pan's Labyrinth is an amazing movie. It's better than most movies. So is Dark Fate. And people hate it because they're just racist in the West. There's not really anything else to say other than there's huge amounts of work to do. You can't really justify it. Like, just going, oh, well, the working class just, they're just something and they're just confused. They're just racist. And you got to get past that. So, and like the world, but it's it's not that like there's people don't understand. It's really just like you're trained to believe by the United States education system and the U.S. white supremacist capitalist colonial system that the United States and the Western world and the Christian world, especially if you're on the right wing, and the man world on the right wing, and then the American man and woman world if you're on the left wing. Not so much the trans people though, unless we need you to pilot some drones. But it's the best world, and everyone else has to. We don't learn Mexican. You learn English. We don't learn Spanish. You learn English. Because it's just better, right? You're trained to be that, and that's all wrong. It's incorrect. If anything, I mean, by that logic, you should learn Chinese, but the Chinese are not asking you. They're not saying you learn Chinese. The Chinese are learning English, because they people are learning both, but they're not saying you have to. But it's the Americans that say, no, you learn my language, you do my thing, you make characters revolve around me. I'm not gonna watch a movie where the main character is not an American. Do you think of how hubristic that is? Why does every character have to be? I am not watching Mrs. Marvel. I'm not watching Miss Marvel because I can't relate. Right? There's like that other. What was that show? With the red show with the Asian girl. I'm not watching that show. I can't relate to the Asian experience. That's the supremacy. That's the white American supremacy and the racism right there. I'm not watching hordes of audiences. The Marvel has already said, right? It's like Marvel, Miss Marvel performing poorly, right? It performed poorly, but it was performing well with people of color, right? If you didn't have a racist America, these shows would perform just as well as shows that are not centering white Americans, right? But the fact that these shows perform far more poorly is your racism, is your exceptionalism. The fact that you can't see yourself, because people have the same struggles, it's not really that different actually. People are just humans, right? The food is different, the sound accent's different, the language is a little different. But if you cannot, if you refuse to watch a thing because the people are different, and it feels and it sounds different, that is the supremacy. It's libidinal, it's psychological, it's economic, it's intellectual, it's across the board. That's a huge problem. If you can't, if the people of the United States and the Western world, Canada, Europe, cannot get past that stuff, it doesn't bode well for those people, because it's not their world anymore. That's part of the reality. Americans need to be facing that now, not tomorrow, not next year, not 5 years, now, because America is going away right now. So so that's where, like, and so I'm gonna bring this back to Resident Evil. I'm a little bit off, but I brought up Dark Fate because the main character in Dark Fate is because the main character of Dark Fate is a Mexican character, and it starts in Mexico, and it's Spanish with Spanish subtitles, right? It's Spanish. You cannot watch Dark Fate in English, as far as I don't know. There's no dub version of it, or maybe there is now. But when it came out, you're watching the first half of the movie in Spanish, and the perspective is they're trying to get across the border through the terrible immigration where they keep children in daycare centers, where they keep kids in little dog kennels, and they die from malnutrition, and feed them Jolly Ranchers and call that fun, right? And which is terrible for the little children, and keep them. This hasn't ended, by the way. This is all continuing and getting worse under Trump and Biden. This is right, and so you get to experience it from the other side, right? And that was hugely that was difficult for a lot of. I'm using it euphemistically when I'm being very nice when I say it was difficult for American audiences, who didn't like Dark Fate, and so but that's important that the show was. I mean, that's why I really went to bat for Dark Fate, even though a lot of people weren't, is because that is the educate. That is the education, empathy, and way of like full spectrum, individual and collective transformation that America needs. Not really just about education, learning something. It's about transforming who you are, right? In all aspects of yourself and your as a culture and as a society. This kind of stuff has to keep happening. Despite how much people don't like to watch these shows, or not to say like the show. The show is just one aspect of it. It's not just the show. Lots of other aspects in reality have to change. But the show was a test, right? It was kind of like, can you handle this? And if you can't handle that, it's kind of like some people listen to the Silver Spook stream and then they go, oh my God, Silver Spook, when you said that the U.S. is a deeply racist, like barely salvageable, if at all, country, I had to leave. And then I came back later when I actually got educated about its actual history. Because I didn't have any history classes because I went to any schools in America, which don't teach history. And so I went back and I read some like Fanon and some, I went from a native daughter and all these other things. And they come back and like, oh my God, I didn't realize. But like you need the first experience of like, because most Americans are still in a place where, I think amongst a lot of people are not necessarily proud, just happy to call themselves Americans, but they still have a lot of misplaced faith in the U.S. It's capitalism. And that's where crap like this doesn't help. That's where people just wearing American flags unironically, especially people of color, that doesn't help with the process, right? I don't care about how historical. Oh, it's just historical 1980s nostalgia. Well, America needs to grow up and get out of its childhood. That was another stream I did. I mean, it's like you can like enjoy things, and I like to go back and play old games and watch old movies and stuff, but it's gotta be like not trapping you in that phase, because it's not gonna help to build the world that's actually going to be livable, right? In every way. So anyways, I've already made that point 5 times. So let's go back to Resident Evil. Yeah, so Resident Evil starts inside of Mexico. That's what I wanted to say, right? So Resident Evil starts in Mexico with Spanish as the language. And I think like a lot of people that are giving it negative reviews are people who want to see they're just racist, period, because they've been trained to and live in a racist culture called Western culture, right? They're just racist, and they're just like, I don't want to see Mexicans, and I don't want to read no subtitles, and I don't want to see people that aren't white dudes centered, and I hate illegals because they're taking my jobs, or they're replacing us, and they're teaming up with the SJWs, and Jordan Peterson is here to defend Western culture from all the illegal aliens and all of their woke SJWs that are gonna ally and build a fallen American culture. The IQ of this and that is just higher statistically, blah, 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 blah. All those people, right, who have been trained by Jordan Peterson as one of a group of people. And if you want to see my take on, you want to know what I think about Jordan and Elliot Page. I did a video about that. I did a video about that last week. And the point is kind of like Western civilization, right? Western civilization is dependent on people like Jordan Peterson coming out and saying, no, you can't be trans. That doesn't exist. You're still the gender that you were assigned, and that's period. And you're destroying Western civilization, right? And so, by extension, too many brown and black people. I mean, he's not quite as overt as some other right wing people are, but if too many Mexicans and brown and black people come into America, it's going to destroy. Well, they'll say something else. They'll say like too many people who aren't real Americans come into America. It will destroy. It will degenerate the virtue and the strength and the character of America or Canada. Right? If too many Africans come into Europe, right, like out of Ukraine, that's why they take all the black refugee babies and they put them in a box and then they let them stay in the war zone, and all the little white, blonde hair, blue eyed babies come into France and Britain and everywhere else in Europe. Because if too many of those dark people come into our white Europe and our white America and our white Canada, our very virtuous, strong, intellectually powerful, great countries, it will pollute and degenerate our gene pool. This is like deep and long history. And by extension, queer people, women, if the women start asking for equality, that will deteriorate and destroy and erode the greatness of Canada and America. And so, like, you know, and so that you know, people who accept that, and people who listen to that, and people who abide by that, when they see a movie that centers people outside of America, especially people that are like looking, because that's actually something that was interesting, was in Resident Evil. Let me see if I can close some of this. So I'll close a bunch of this. I made my Dark Fate point. In Resident Evil, it starts off right in Mexico, and there is a journalist. All right, let's see if I can get a picture of that. It starts off in Tijuana. Tijuana on Netflix is a shocking look at Mexico's history. Okay, that's not. I'm sorry, that's not. That's a show called Tijuana. I'm gonna do very bad at finding what I need to find. But yeah, in Resident Evil, it starts off in Tijuana. Let's see if I can find that guy. No, I'm not gonna be able to find it. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna try to find it, and then I'm not gonna find it, and I'm gonna like just stop. Okay. So anyway, so it starts off in Tijuana, and there's a journalist who is interviewing people, right? He's interviewing people trying to solve a disease breaks out, right? And from one of these laboratories, and it causes people to lose their mind after 3 days, and it's unclear what's going on, but they're turning into zombies basically. But you know, it's like it's a disease coming out of a corporation, right? That is a U.S. corporation, U.S. headquartered corporation, coming into other countries, right, like Mexico, and has these labs, right? I mean, like for example, the U.S. has hundreds of many labs in Ukraine, and U.S. has the U.S. This is the reality I want to get to. I'm taking a long time to get there, but the U.S. has biolabs around the world. The U.S. is 59 labs around the world handle the deadliest pathogens. U.S. funded biolabs are everywhere. You know, this is the reality, right? And most of the, you know, who has all of the who is in every other one else's country? Is it China that has 800 bases around the world and almost in more than half the countries of the world? Is it Russia that has bases in everyone else's country? Is it I don't know, is it some indigenous territory? Is it Bolivia that has bases? No, it's the U.S. and U.S. allied and funded biolabs, 336 biolabs in 30 countries all over the planet. So like and this is the thing about weaponization. When I come back to, you know, I'm going to get to it. Weaponization of disease. The United States is the number one weaponizer of disease. The biolabs, they're not researching, you know, how to do universal healthcare or cure diseases necessarily. A lot of what they're doing, right? They've actually admitted to this. Victoria Nuland herself has admitted, yeah, we're crafting a avian flu H1N1 hybrid disease in labs in Ukraine that would be carried by pigeons and other birds, with a disease genetically tailored to target Russian Slavic biology to wipe out our enemies. They literally genetically modified to wipe out specific subpopulations of the earth is what the U.S. They have admitted to doing that. It's like, well, that's embarrassing. Don't talk about it. So most people don't talk about it in English because they want to have a job and not get wiped off the internet. So I should probably stop. But, you know, the point is that, like, they've admitted to that. It's not the only one. They've used chemical warfare all over the place, right? And so when in Resident Evil, I'm gonna see if I can find the Resident Evil cast. Let me see. So when in the beginning of Resident Evil, you have what was a journalist? Yeah. Lance, no, not the. Who is the reporter of Resident Evil? No, not that one. Resident Evil Netflix cast. Yeah. So, okay, I can't find him. But you know, in the beginning, there's a journalist, right, in Mexico, right, and he's asking like, what happened? What happened at the lab? What happened to your husband, right? What happened? And the lady is crying. She's recounting how she, her husband, he loved to play sports. He loved his kids. He was a good husband and father. And I'm never gonna find it. And so he's, and the journalist is like, okay, what happened? Well, he worked at this lab, and then one day he came back and he started having rashes on his body. He started having all these illnesses, and then he started having headaches, and then he felt sick. He was throwing up, and then he started changing. He became more aggressive. He became more violent. He became more He became more American. He became more like a Westerner, and he became more violent and abusive. No, he started suffering the T virus, where he was suffering a biologically designed. He was suffering a U.S. corporation and state, which the U.S. only has a capitalist corporate state plutocracy. It's under the U.S. empire and the military-industrial complex, so it's all the same thing. And they actually say that in the show, which is it's the U.S. government and the corporations together, Umbrella Corporation and the U.S. government, had a lab in Mexico, right? And they, because of their own malfeasance and their own lack of procedures, allowed their staff in Mexico to get contaminated with the plague. That they did a biological weapon that they designed, and then that weapon, and then the husband succumbed and then ended up becoming a zombie basically and kill people, and then the plague spread, right? This is actually what the U.S. has done. Like, you can look up it's Fort Detrick, but you can look up what the U.S. has done in Asia, including weaponizing malaria-carrying mosquitoes and cholera and dropping them in bombs in Korea, as one example. And there's like many, historically, colonizers have used weaponized, many diseases. We're going to get to those to wipe out indigenous populations. This is not like brand new. The British, America was built on biological warfare. Millions of indigenous people died because of weaponized smallpox blankets brought to wipe out Native Americans. So white people could show up and put black slaves on them and make a lot of money and build the world's most horrible capitalist imperialist superpower called the United States. And that's just one. So biological warfare is the history of colonization, is the wider point. And in Resident Evil, you actually kind of see it come out a little. I was surprised. I was like, wow, I can't believe Netflix let this. I can't believe that some editors in the LA and the DC script combers, right, the imperialist Pentagon, should have combed out all of this. Like in Hulk, right? There's that aspect of Hulk that had Edward Norton. They changed the name of the project, right? They changed the Hulk changed the name of project U.S. military request. I can find out. I should have looked this up beforehand, but the original name, U.S. military alternative. Anyway, so the point is, like, there was the military base of Fort Johnson. His name was Kenneth Johnson. No, maybe that's not it. So my point is that in the Hulk, the project, one of the projects that's mentioned, right, is an actual project to use biological warfare against civilian populations, and the U.S. military was conducting. And so the U.S. military put a request to the producers of the Hulk movie with Edward Norton. Not a request; it was actually an order. It says, change the name of that, because if people looked up that name that they used, right? If they looked up the name that was used in Hulk, people might find out that the U.S. has been, because U.S. is accusing Syria, U.S. is accusing China, U.S. is accusing Russia, U.S. is accusing all kind of countries that it wants to blow up and sanction and destroy of biological, chemical warfare. Saddam Hussein, right? Saddam Hussein is using illegal biological, chemical weapons of some sort. We have to stop this. Syria is using these illegal chemical, biological weapons. It's stuff it's so bad, we have to intervene, right? Obama ran a war on that, right? And so, but the U.S. is the number one weaponizer of biological and chemical warfare, by its own admission. And it's so sad that this is how diseducated the West is. Their own leaders are constantly admitting and having to admit, because it's so hard to cover it up, all of these, snafus, like the coup in Ukraine. And, we're the most democratic country. You just like literally on the phone recording saying, fuck this EU, we're going to just coup whoever we want, right? Elon just comes out and says we coup whoever we want. You don't care about democracy. You're the ones using all the biological weapons. You're the one, and please, Hollywood, stop accidentally putting the name of our biological weapons projects while we accuse China of biological weapons projects. The U.S. is it's not even close, right? Anyway, so my point is that I was amazed that they didn't redact it the way that the Hulk had the name of one of these illegal, under international law, illegal weapons projects redacted. But what that tells me is that the U.S. is falling asleep at the wheel. It can't even control its own Hollywood, which is supposed to be the propaganda arm of the military-industrial capitalist racist complex, but it can't even control its own, brainwashing machine called all of TV and all of film and games, which is, that's good news. It's good. Netflix, keep letting everything slip out. But coming back to this, so my point is that, so like, what's happening in a show where that guy is actually I think, I forget maybe he's French. I'm mistaken. It's a very international show, right? That's another thing that people don't like. It's kind of like Pacific Rim, right? It's a very international. Pacific Rim has some Americans in it, but the main character, it's not centering around America saving the world. It's kind of like, it's like almost like just let's bring Pacific Rim into my infinite inception, infinite recursion of tabs. Smorgasbord. Pacific Rim is a show, right? That has characters from all around the world. Let's see, Pacific Rim 1 characters. See if I can get the characters. So Pacific Rim is a show that Charlie Day, the main dude. I guess the main dude, is American, but it's a show that's about all of the different peoples of the Pacific, right? So you have just there's Japan, there's Russia, China has the triplets. Russia has like a non-binary couple. And it's not sure, they're almost androgynous. And nobody, there's a lot of things happening there actually. And then there's characters, there's countries from all over the Asia and Pacific region cooperating to fight kaiju, giant creatures, right, coming out of the ocean, right? It's almost like Asia Pacific cooperation instead of unilateral U.S. led hegemony. It's a weird concept, but that's what. But that pisses off both the U.S. imperialists, people that are in the Pentagon making millions of dollars sitting around, and Wall Streeters, planning to make money selling bombs and missiles to drop into Taiwan or base on Hawaii, or implant into Guam and leak all over their water supply. But also, it's frustrating to American audiences who are trained to believe that America saves everyone. Pacific Rim is about everyone saving everyone, right? It's about Asian and Pacific Island peoples, and a lot of Russia is Asian, by the way. And Russia does have territory that touches the Pacific, so it makes sense, right? So it's Russia, China, people from the U.S., but also people from all around the world, coming together to stop. It's kind of a metaphor for climate change or COVID. It's like global cooperation to stop actual problems like climate change and COVID, which is what you would need to deal with those problems, right? And the U.S. looks at that movie, and because it's made by a Mexican guy, Guillermo del Toro, it's not a mistake that movie has a more non-Western exceptionalist, not necessarily not a white supremacist American exceptionalist perspective. It has an internationalist perspective in the way that it sees the world and its view, compared to compared to I closed all those tabs, but compared to Marvel Multiverse of Madness, any Marvel, Avengers, right, or Stranger Things, which is America's the best, Russia's evil, and then they try to destroy American malls and capitalism, right? Right. Avengers is Russia's evil. The only good Russian is the one that defects, like the Black Widow. Everyone else in Russia's horribly brainwashed and confused. They should be reading the New York Times in Russia, and they should watch Avengers, and then they would learn the right way. Pacific Rim is, well, there's Russians and they're different. There's Chinese and they're different. There's Japanese and they're different, and there's people in the U.S. and they're, hopefully they can work with us, but whatever. We'll still sell you. We'll still make all your nuts and your bolts and give you tens of millions of COVID PPE, even though you're racist to us Chinese. But anyway, so it's all the people working together to fight actual problems like climate change and COVID. Where America is like, we're gonna go blow up bad people, just us. We're gonna go blow everyone up, which is what they're doing in the Pacific, right? Putting missile bases. They're gonna go blow up innocent people, right? That's what the U.S. does. We're gonna put the world's largest imperial headquarters, the Death Star. We're gonna build it on Hawaii, right? We're gonna have the world's largest per capita military personnel and land usage in Hawaii, and they're gonna put in Okinawa. We're gonna crush those people under all of our missile systems. Guam, we're gonna try to push Vietnam to become the next Ukraine. That's what they want to do. Talking about we have to defend human rights in Vietnam. I just saw an article come out about that. And we're going to fight evil people, which means we're going to kill innocent people for money and to stop the spread of win-win cooperation or communism, ultimately. Multipolarity and pluripolarity, and finally socialism, ideally, and then communism, right? But the U.S. is about fighting the bad guys, right? Whereas Pacific Rim is, and that's where you can see the difference between those the underpinning, like they're more like the area, like the 10,000 mile aerial worldview of those shows. Like internally, the shows deal with like having hormones as a teenager in high school. That's all like fully identifiable. Like the Hellfire Club and Stranger Things, and just like the kids' adventures and the Goonies references and the Alien references, and I like seeing Mr. Burke from Aliens and things, and it's cute and it's it's fun. The special effects is good, but when you look at what is it really, it's ultimate perspective, like from a global view, it's not good. Anyways, so where something I haven't watched all of Resident Evil, but that's something I noticed is like you starting in Mexico, so that's already like okay, you're alienating like 70% of American audiences who are racist and American exceptionalists by starting it in Mexico. So I was like, wow, that was a bold move. That was like a Dark Fate move. Number two, you're directly calling out in Resident Evil U.S. corporations, right? Like the giant, weapons manufacturers like Lockheed Martin, like Halliburton, that also, biotech corporations, and the U.S. government and military by extension. In the first like 10 minutes of the show, I was like, who is funding this show? It could just be like it just like slipped through the radar. The thing also to remember is, in Japan, which is a place that's not, it's got a complicated history and it's not good, but there are people that have been on the other side of things all along. They've never wanted fascism in Japan. They never wanted military, or if they, maybe when they were raised under a certain mentality, but Japan had its own left this whole time. There were revolutionary internationalists that work to help liberate and try their best to fight for Palestine, that were born in Japan. A lot of them are women, actually. There's one that's escaping my memory right now, but Resident Evil came out of Japan, and the Japanese name for Resident Evil, right, is Biohazard, right? This is actually something that I bring up when I talk about video games. There's a lot of video games which had their origin in Asia, right? Specifically in Japan was one of those places, right? That was led and became the greatest creator of video games early on in the 70s, 80s, and then America played catch up, right? And that was part of the yellow peril of the 80s, right? I often talk about was the worry that Japan and Asians would surpass the United States, right? That's I think I'm turning Japanese. That's the Nakatomi Plaza in Die Hard. Oh no, the Japanese are in America. That's Blade Runner, right? The techno orientalist, Asia is gonna surpass us. And so they had to be crushed, and America did crush Japan by kidnapping executives, sabotaging their Toshiba, and with combination of economic sanctions. It's like really a hybrid warfare that they conducted against Japan to break its back and its growing dominance in the semiconductor and the microchip industry, right? And so Biohazard, but the name Biohazard, right? And the name of Biohazard has a specific reference in East Asia, which is a place that has suffered biological warfare from the United States, and places in Japan were also places where U.S. military bases are stationed, right? Shinzo Abe's whole program, the guy who recently died, who was a fascist and a relative, the descendant of one of the most horrible war criminals in the 20th century, right? Japan has been weaponized like Germany and Ukraine, right? Bordering the actual Western capitalist colonizer world's enemies, which is Russia and China. Not necessarily because they're perfect, but because they're counter hegemonic, right? And so Japan doesn't really, Japan is a lot closer than California. It's about, it's over 5,000 miles closer than California. I think it's like 8,000 miles closer to the war zone that America wants to start, right? So Japan is actually always in danger. This is something that people don't really realize, and they don't really talk about it. But Japan, like Okinawa, which is their own indigenous people, and Japanese imperialists benefit and fascists materially benefit economically by collaborating with the United States at the expense of the Okinawan or Ryukyuan people who have 70% of the military bases, and their environment, their people, their lifeways, their culture has suffered and been crushed, similar to Hawaiians. Like, we have been crushed under U.S. occupation. But Japan, all of Taiwan, which is part of China, by the way, all of Guam and Vietnam, all these areas, Vietnam and Korea have directly been hit by chemical and biological, as well as, right, just straight up bombing into the Stone Age warfare. But Vietnam has had Agent Orange, napalm, right? That's chemical war. That's all illegal, but it doesn't matter because America makes up whatever rule it wants and nobody goes to jail for war crimes. Vietnam, millions of people died. Korea, millions of people died and suffered and starved, right? And biological warfare was weaponized in East Asia. And Japan is a place where this all could happen. And so when you hear biohazard, it has a specific meaning in Japan, which is like, this is a place where we could be suffering this any second now. Look at our neighbors, and like, I don't have all the receipts on that, but I mean, it's a good, I haven't checked, but I'm sure there's a very high probability there's lots of biolabs in Japan, where the U.S. is designing the weapons specifically to target Asians, right? Just like they target Slavic Russian DNA with variants of avian flu, because America's making if anybody was making a COVID-19 as a bioweapon to wipe out populations of the earth, it's the United States, because that's what they do. They're like entire mountains of paper. There are like giant Terry Gilliam Brazil style mountains of paperwork talking about how much they just love and has historically and presently, have and continue to use biological warfare. And then they talk about other people doing biological warfare. But that's like everything else. Forced labor's over there. Who has all the prison labor, right? Arizona community. I mean, just quick, just another example of this. Who is accusing China of forced labor despite no concrete evidence? Even their own UN inspector, right? Goes over there, right? Comes back, says, I don't have any evidence, and she gets fired of this forced labor, right? In Xinjiang. And who Who is doing the forced labor? Like the U.S. is openly admitting. I mean, just as one of these hypocrisies, because I'm talking about biolab, right, accusations, forced labor accusations of China. Who is openly admitting, right? This is again how uneducated is the entire Western world. Either a combination of uneducated, hypocritical, hubristic, and just malicious. Some combination of those. Ignorance and evil. Some combination of those two. That's the cocktail that makes up the Western world. Arizona communities would collapse without cheap prison labor, corrections director says. I mean, look at this like slightly fatter, older Kyle Rittenhouse face, right? That's the face that just says, I just would just love to shoot me some black people on the weekend and cover it up with the complicity of the lying police. That's the guy who openly says, we need slave labor. The United States is crying and pleading to its own government and businesses, please throw more money at our police and prisons. Otherwise, all of our privileged white people wouldn't have a nice place to live because we need slave labor in the prisons. And the U.S. has the gall to go accuse other, like your own officials are just like going, we need, not only do we have forced labor, we need more forced labor. Right? And the U.S. is like, well, we should, the Uyghur Act, right? The Uyghur Xinjiang Sanction Act just went into effect. And you're like over here, where's the sanctions on Mr. Corrections Director and all of Arizona? Arizona shouldn't be shipping any products. No agriculture, no steel, no wheat. Where's the internal sanctions on Arizona? America? They're hypocrite. I mean, it's like anyway, you if you know anything, if you have any education, I mean, most Americans don't, and most Europeans and Canadians and New Zealanders don't. They live in fantasy land. But if you're like, one of the global South people, color indigenous people, or people that like are on the side and you understand this stuff, the hypocrisy is off the charts, right? I mean, speaking of that, I mean, an entire video game about mass incarceration, police, and the prison industry, called Neofeud. The main character literally lost his job, right? By the way, if you just a quick PSA, Neofeud is 70% off. So if you would like to help us Native Hawaiians pay bills, keep doing this education work, streaming, making games, keeping a roof over our heads, and keeping the lights on, electricity, etc., as well as complete the sequels, consider checking out the anti-capitalist, anti-racist cyberpunk games like Neofeud. But Neofeud is directly about this issue, where the main character was fired because he refused to mass incarcerate and shoot marginalized people. Right? Now, it's in cyberpunk, it's fun, candy-coated cyberpunk shell, because, average white gamer isn't going to want to play a game that says this is a game about racism. Because, like, well, I don't want SJWs telling me, but this is the art that I've been trying to perfect. It's kind of like putting thumbnails on your YouTube videos that are about fun Marvel movies. And then somewhere along the way, you get educated, maybe. And also the stream may stay up because the Death Star doesn't figure out that I'm using their satellites to educate people. Anyways, but Neofeud is, it's about this hypocrisy, right? And you don't realize that some people don't realize what I'm talking about, which I'm talking about America. Neofeud is it's not really about the future. It's about the present, right? Like a lot of science fiction is. And it's not really about feudalism in the 1700s, and maybe it's really although it does deal with the feudal structure and how feudalism is here along with capitalism and with slavery and with racism and colonialism. These haven't really gone. They've all just morphed, evolved into each other, like so much like a T virus. Being outcompeted by a G virus, or like, I don't know, an Omicron BA4 being surpassed by a BA5. Capitalism and colonialism and feudalism, feudalism and colonialism and racism, capitalism, they all work together and they kind of are around in different proportions. That's why Elon Musk calls himself a techno king. And that's why the Queen of England has a $400 million diamond in her head still. And somehow she's still alive, despite being a war criminal and a beneficiary of racism and slavery. I thought racism and colonialism was over, right? Except it's not. They just get the West doesn't actually make progress, unlike what progressives like AOC would like to believe. She's an imperialist war criminal also. The West does not make progress. It gets better at lying. Doesn't the Western capitalist, imperial, colonial, racist, feudalist world has all those systems all together. It's kind of like, it's like like neoteny. It's like your phylogenetic recurrence. Every time you are also a fish and a worm and a frog and a nematode, and in the stages of your fetus. Like the West is all of those things at the same time, and it just, whichever one is currently doing the best in the moment, right, is on the forefront, and whichever face looks the best, like Western liberal democratic order, right? That sounds good. Rules-based order. It's a rules-based order any different from the empire and the empire state? No, it just flies better now. It's not any different. It's actually worse now because the U.S. is going to blow the whole earth up. The U.S. empire in the early 1890s, 1900s wasn't capable of annihilating all life on Earth. So it hasn't gotten any better. It's actually gotten worse. And it's gotten better. It's evolved better lies and PR. That's the only change. And that's part of the point of Neofeud. And that's why I have like feudal kings and levitating in castles they have labels like the king/CEO. Elon Musk is just taking what I'm doing and ripping me off and calling himself the techno king of Tesla, right? While being a racist, colonial, apartheid beneficiary, plus royalty, feudalism, plus he has capitalist corporations, right, that he breaks the workers' legs of when they ask for raises, right, with the cops that he owns in California. And so it's all the systems are all there, right? It's not like they've changed, right? Black people are poorer now than they were in the 1950s, 60s during the height of the civil rights movement. So nothing's actually gotten any better. It's gotten worse. It's gotten worse because they got better at lying about about covering up how bad they are, right? Biological warfare is actually gotten worse, right? Biological warfare, the U.S. is going to destroy this whole entire planet's capacity to have any outings ever again, because you're all going to die from its diseases that it may have designed, if anyone. Probably, if anyone did, it would have been the United States. I mean, I don't have proof about that one, but it doesn't really matter. But the U.S. has designed diseases to kill people and use them. And the U.S. is also, by its failures and its capitalist system and its lack of testing, tracing, lockdowns, conveying information, government, people's responses, lack of transparency, et cetera, the U.S. is giving you a world where there will be COVID and 25 million different variants forever. So that's worse than the biological warfare it's ever conducted in that sense. The U.S. is doing its greatest biological warfare in this moment. So back to biological warfare. Biohazard. So the word biohazard. I don't like using blood quantum Western racist, eugenicist descriptions of ethnicity. Technically, I'd be a quarter Japanese under that, but that's not really what matters. I have ancestry that's from Japan, but I took some Japanese, but I'm not lived in Japan, so I can't say this for sure. But in Asia generally, when you talk about biohazard and bioweapons, it means something very specific because they have suffered in the last 80 years definite, like I'm talking about actual military planes dropping munitions carrying malarial mosquitoes, right? And weaponizing actual plague to kill people in Asia. Very close to Japan, by the way. Korea and Japan is very close. So Japan, right? If the US were to continue to do that, they know that they would be on the chopping block. If there were nuclear, non-nuclear, bio or chemical exchanges, Japan would be a place that would be hit with the bioweapons, right? And they're also looking at their neighbors and they're going, oh my God, we're all getting hit with bioweapons. So biohazard is actually part of that is, I would argue, like Ghost in the Shell, it's a lot of very critical, there's a lot of critique of the US imperialism, from a Japanese perspective, which of course there's other perspectives under that. The the Ryukyu people be like, well, fuck you guys. But there are a lot of people that are also like they're not happy that there's bases like there's a song Shima Uta was written by a Japanese person for the people in Okinawa, and he gave the song to an indigenous person in Okinawa, Rimi Natsukawa, specifically so that she could benefit from it, and spread the message about how a quarter of the population was lost in the war battle of Okinawa. And so the people in Japan just because Shinzo Abe is terrible and they currently have leadership still that abides by the U.S. as a client state of the United States, that allow U.S. military operations to continue and back U.S. imperialist interests in Tokyo and in the government of Japan. There's all the people in Japan that are like, I was never happy with this, and I don't want that to continue to happen, right? Miyazaki is one of those people. He is communist and anti-war, right? He's not. All of his movies are like about preserve the environment, stop the endless excess and greed and capitalism. It reads a lot like an indigenous. It's almost like an indigenous Turtle Island person's movie. That's why a lot of people, indigenous people in America, connect heavily with the Miyazaki stuff because it's very similar. Coexistence with nature, thinking of nature as having agency, etc. And it's also anti-war because how does that, this goes along. And it's also very communistic because indigenous people are communistic. And there is Shinto and there's other culture that is underneath a lot of the imperial and fascistic culture in the Meiji era culture that is underneath that top layer. Especially, there's the Yamato era, but then there's also the most recent like horrors in the World War II and in the 1890s. But there's other people in Japan that are like, I just wanted to farm and like, I just wanted to like frolic in the woods with the kitsune, not just do that, but I wanted to coexist with nature and do my farming and have peace. I didn't want all this war and this fascism and this murder and genocide. I didn't want to participate in the massacres in Taiwan of indigenous people and the slaughter of millions of Chinese people. I never wanted that. And they still don't want that. And they don't want biological warfare in Japan or anywhere in Asia. They don't want to be used. Like some Hawaiians currently work for the U.S. military in my family, but there's a lot of Hawaiians that don't. More of them, people in Hawaii that, also, they don't like Hanani Keitras is one of them, right? They don't want biological warfare in Hawaii. They don't want chemical warfare in Hawaii. They don't want nuclear warfare in Hawaii. They don't want any warfare in Hawaii, right? And so these people, but then colonization and imperialism and weaponization of this, what they call like the pointless dotting of the world with American military and bases, and governments and interests and neoliberal co-option of the local governments, right, all around the world, is complicated because big swaths of people get bought off, diseducated. American history books get put in place, and then you have this deep confusion that sets in. This American brain, this Western brain of being perpetually confused, dump your head filled with brain poison, false information, right? And then you have to try to figure out who you were before everything got screwed up. That's why I'm always trying to have to figure this out. But anyway, so coming back to the present, that's part of what Biohazard, I would argue, is about under the surface. You might not notice it, right? But Wesker, Albert Wesker in Resident Evil 1, Wesker is an American, right? Albert Wesker is an accomplished virologist, right? Who is an American corporate who works, right? He works with bioweapons divisions, and he from the Japanese perspective, when you look at him with his slick back blonde hair and his glasses, he's designed to look like a very American, like he's kind of like Guile. Like when you look at Guile, people don't really realize, but the Japanese were kind of. I bring this about Street Fighter because Street Fighter is one of those games when you look closely, it is an outside of the U.S. like Pacific Rim. It's an outside the U.S. perspective looking in. Actually, let's look at that really quickly. It's an outside of the U.S. perspective, Asian specifically, looking into the U.S. Right? Even though you might not notice it. Street Fighter. Let's see, Honda stage. If you notice, like in Street Fighter, like the Japanese characters are in Honda is in a bathtub, like a sauna, right? Area, Chun Li stage. Let me see. In the Chinese character Chun Li is in an Asian market with just like there's just like some road, and there's people selling chicken, and there's a restaurant. There's some people bikes. There's some people biking around, right? It's a Chinese little town area. In the Dalsim area, Dalsim stage. Let me say that. In the character from India, the character is in a I think it's a temple with elephants, and there's all this local cultural flavor, right? Some of it's kind of cartoonish, right? And his arms and legs shoot out, and he shoots fireballs. But when you go to even the bad guys, Sagat or Sagat, I forgot how you say it. The guy from Bangkok, you have a statue in Thailand. There's coconut trees. It's a nice tropical green and blue scene. It's just a place in the country of the fighter, right? Each person stage. Even like let's see, Vega. Vega is Spanish. In the movie, Vega is played by an indigenous person, by the way. So actually, the movie Street Fighter it's a lot more based than any. It's a lot more internationalist and a lot more based than anyone could have expected, especially in that time. It's actually more indigenous people. There's actually like red washing where indigenous people play more of the white characters than anything else, right? Because indigenous person plays Saga, an indigenous person plays the Spanish colonizer person, and there's another one I can't remember. There's another indigenous character that's playing an indigenous character. But anyway, so in Vega in Spain is playing it's a bull ring, or it's like a fight, it's a cage fighting place, and there's flamenco guitar and the ethnic dances, etc. So but when the Street Fighter Guile stage, in Guile himself, right? Guile himself is a caricature, right, of America. I don't think Americans don't even get it, when they're kind of being made fun of. But Guile is the only character in Street Fighter as the American who is not represented in his home. Like Honda is in Japan in the bathhouse. Chun-Li is in the market in China. Dalsim is in a temple in India, right? Sagat is, outside near statues, somewhere in a field in Thailand. Guile is in your country. The American, with his ridiculous flat top blonde, is in his military fatigues, because that's where America always, when they're in you. Hey, what's up, Japan? I'm in you. Hey, Hawaii, I'm in you now, right? You're not in America. When you come to America, you're going to be like us. And you're not going to do whatever we say. But we're going to come to your country in military planes and bases with aircraft carriers carrying our F-16s, right? Surrounded by all of our military men and women who are, 25 times more rape and sexual abuse in Korea is conducted by American military troops. We're going to show up. We're going to toxify your water. We're going to take 25% of your land and make it into military bases like in Hawaii. We're going to take all your land in Okinawa. We're going to make it bases. We're going to take all of your entire region of Korea and make it put it under a giant crosshair from China and Korea by putting bases all over it. We're going to take your country. We're going to be in you, right? So you just think if you, from the American perspective, like I didn't notice it. I was raised as an American, right, with 3/5 of a human because I have brown skin, because that's what America views brown people as. So I was raised I was culturally genocided. So my Hawaiian, I don't speak Hawaiian very fluently, but in my American brain, right, they call it two-eyed seeing, right? And there's an indigenous phrase that means two-eyed seeing. You can see from colonizer and indigenous perspectives, seeing through the two worlds. In my American brain, I didn't see anything wrong with Guile. There's nothing unusual. Of course, America isn't at home. America is everywhere else because the rest of the world isn't America yet. When the rest of the world is a Western, capitalist, America-led, ideally eating McDonald's French fries and quadruple bacon heart attack burgers, and drinking Slurpees, and listening to some kind of American music that was stolen from black people, like rock or something. When the rest of the world is American, then America's job will be done. Do you see? But that's the expectation. Just as an American, I know what this is because I was raised there. But that's a completely fucked up expectation. But the U.S. is the one, and everyone else is the U.S. is the one on a Star Destroyer. I'm sorry, an aircraft carrier, flying its TIE fighters. I'm sorry, F-16s, with all of its stormtroopers. I'm sorry, just Marines, Army, Navy, and Air Force in your country, right? Blowing you up, threatening you with biohazard, right? Poisoning your water, making you American, making sure that your country is capitalist and under the thumb of imperial U.S., D.C. and Wall Street headquartered billionaire interests, making you eat the hamburgers, making you put the arches, giving you the Disneyland, making you play baseball, making you, right, just like Japan, you got to play baseball, making you, like the music, making you do everything. And the rest of the world is in on the joke, but Americans aren't. They're just like, oh, obviously. It's like, but Japan was actually attacking, is critiquing America, like, why? This is who you are. You're a bunch of assholes showing up in our country. I would argue, and everyone else is just like chilling out, having their culture, practicing their languages, and just being in their own place. You're the one over there blowing everyone else up with your warships, right? With your biological weapons. And Ghost in the Shell also has a specific phrase. There's a line in Ghost in the Shell where an American diplomat, when you're watching the anime, you can probably miss this, but there's an American official shows up in Japan, is trying to kidnap Japanese executives, which is what the U.S. did to Toshiba. U.S. did this to France as well, to crush enemies of even friends. When the U.S. thinks that you're getting a little too big and you might compete with America, to give Alstom Corporation all of its energy and electronics and other tech-related business, because France had a company that was starting to get close to the size of American General Electrics, and America went to France, kidnapped French executives, held them in prison for years. That's an act of war, actually. But you know what the secret is? Everyone in the world is constantly just subservient. Even Europe. Like when Angela Merkel gets this phone tapped by the U.S. intelligence, she just says, "I'm sorry, I'll speak up louder next time." Denmark is just a giant eavesdropping satellite dish for America for all of Europe. All the imperialist power, and the imperialist Euro colonizers go along with it because they're run by plutocrats who just want to keep getting nice giant buckets of ice cream, having fancy cars, and plundering Africa some more. And so they all do whatever America says because America's running the show now. But the United States is, it had like it did to France, and then it stomped the rival French corporation down, put its corporations back up, and the French executive was released, and America said never do that again. Sweden and Germany, some individuals in Europe, I think there's some investigation into war crimes in Afghanistan, and Mike Pompeo personally threatened all the families. He threatened the families of all the European officials, German, Swedish. Not that there's a lot of good officials there. They're mostly complicit tools and co-colonizers. But there were a few people with ethics in Sweden that aren't starving the neighbors' children, and a few Germans that weren't going along with the U.S. militarization and renazification of Germany, which they're succeeding right now, because Germany is going to be the next Ukraine. Hopefully not, but the U.S. threatened the families, and all of the investigation into U.S. war crimes in Afghanistan stopped because Europe is a poodle of the United States, and it's afraid. and benefits from its relationships. And Japanese officials, like German officials, and wealthy businessmen, and beneficiaries of the Nazi Deutsche Bank and Volvo money, right, and the Volkswagen. The executives, by the way, there were more Nazis in power after World War II, put in place by the U.S. in Germany, and there were more fascists put in place in power in Japan, Shinzo Abe types, after World War II as well. And in fact, all the war crimes were then brushed over because America needs Nazis, right? Capitalism, imperialism needs fascism, and it always keeps it in the background as a fist to punch out at the communists. That is its actual target, sacrificing the people of Germany and Japan at the same time. So and so in that sense, right? So Japan, it's why it's Japan and Germany, and the UK also, of course, but Germany is closer to the target America and capitalism wants to hit, which is Russia. Japan is very close to China, right? Korea is right there for China. Vietnam is right there for, Vietnam is too base to let America put any missiles, silos, or biological weapons, avian, Resident Evil epidemic makers in Vietnam. Vietnam is not going to let America put biohazard in Vietnam because Vietnam is too base for that. They kick your ass. I'm not. That's not an attack at Korea. Korea is just like, things should happen, and they did fight very hard, and North Korea is still fucking holding the line, right? Because America's trying to hit China and balkanize it, destroy it, and make trillions of dollars, killing 30 million people. That's why New York got a nuclear war PSA this week, because America is preparing to nuke China. So hopefully that doesn't happen. So not biohazard and then radiation hazard. Should have Fallout and Resident Evil. You see how those two games came out in the 90s? Because that's what people who work for tech companies in Silicon Valley, which is the digital arm of the military-industrial capitalist complex. People who work in games and tech are working for the U.S. military generally. They go back and forth in the U.S. There's a revolving door between DC, neocon think tanks and the Call of Duty CEO. They just keep going back and forth. So people who make games in the United States are privy to, and the tech world are privy to the U.S.'s plans a lot of the time, which is to blow the entire fucking planet up with biological, chemical, and nuclear warfare. So you should probably try to do whatever you can to slow that down. So the thing about, but you think, just really think about that. Why are the other characters, right? Why are the other characters in Street Fighter in their homes, and America is they're represented by their home countries, their home cultures, their home food, cities, towns, streets, parks, etc. And the United States is represented by its military. It's because that's the way that the rest of the world sees the United States, including its allies like Japan and Germany to a large extent. I hope that Germany doesn't become Ukraine too, where they all fall into complete utter oblivion and collapse. The euro just dropped beneath the dollar, so Europe is freezing, starving, and going to run out of energy for its economy, and it's going to have economic collapse soon, faster than the United States, which is also not doing well. Now, it's important to remember the people of the United States, while they're doing better than the global South, they are rapidly falling faster than the plutocracy of rich, disproportionately white capitalists that run it, like Germany is run by rich white people as well, and the white racist masses who continue to treat Black and Muslim people badly in Germany, and the renazification of Germany that's happening as Germany's. The last time Germany went into a real bad economic times, things don't go well. It's just really bad individuals, really bad things come out of Germany when all of a sudden there's massive inflation, collapse of jobs, and people are bringing wheelbarrows of Weimar dollars to buy a loaf of bread. Bad things happen in Germany. So the U.S. is really looking forward to using Germany again to hit Russia. I don't know if Germany's going to survive. I know it's going to survive that though. I don't know. I really hope that it goes better. I really hope people can get educated in Europe for the first time, because they never had an education system. 75% of France think the U.S. won World War II. I don't know what. Anyways, so You have U.S. disinformation in Europe is what I'm trying to say. Even though in Europe doesn't even a lot of Europeans don't even realize this, or they think they're smarter than America, but America's playing Europe. Europeans were so smart. These fucking peace-sipping snobs were so smart over there drinking their tea. Oh yes, oh boy, I've got a monocle and I work for the BBC and that makes me very smart. You read your own bullshit books about how colonization was loved by India and that's why you're stupid in Britain. And also, you're owned by the United States, and you're all gonna suffer and die faster than America at this rate. So I don't know how smart Europe is. There's no education system in Europe, but hopefully they'll get one soon. You should feel bad about giving birth to America. By the way, Europe. So Biohazard, Resident, but coming back to Resident Evil. After I'm sorry for that. I'm not sorry, but that was a little fun aside dunking on this, but. Biohazard Resident Evil was a direct, I believe, I can't guarantee, I didn't make this game, but I believe there was a direct commentary to be made about Western and US interference in Asia, specifically East Asia, specifically using biological weapons like malarial mosquitoes, like cholera, like the things that the US was doing at Fort Detrick, etc. And Japan was a place that was under and is under direct threat from U.S. biological warfare, like Europe is under direct threat from U.S. Well, your capitalists and your Nazis are under direct threat from a Russian tank, and you're all getting your asses kicked, Europe and the United States. So, but I mean, I'm not saying that because I want people to suffer and die in a war in Europe. I'm just saying, like, if you go along with imperialist U.S. and NATO and capitalist aggression in the East, and you don't root out your Nazis, there may be Russian and other, especially Russians. There may be Russian tanks and denazification forces coming to eliminate your Nazis, right? And that's why the U.S., there's all these articles. Again, that's another one of the things. What U.S. and BBC and European news were all talking about, oh my God, there's so many Nazis. There's so many racists and fascists and ultra-nationalists in Ukraine. There are all these articles coming out in the last 8 years. All of a sudden, they disappeared, right? And now it's all like Ukraine is full of the most, righteous, most holy people, and we're all... Zelensky's collaborations with the Nazis is all gone. But again, that's because there's no education system in U.S. and Europe. The fact that anybody would eat that shit up and everyone is putting blue and yellow flags, people with like 5 PhDs in math, science, technology, and history, you're fucking putting blue and yellow flags all over their Twitter bios. That tells you what they didn't learn when they were getting all their 5 PhDs, which is anything that is remotely actually needed. So, anyways, but now Europe is going to lose that war, and if they don't get it right, they're gonna, there's going to be more denazification happening in new Nazi Germany, because the U.S. is pushing U.S. is funneling all the money and effort it can into the right wings of all of Europe right now. They're like, don't kid yourself. Right? Because the U.S. does not want like socialist Europe that could lead to a socialist United States. Right? They don't want Europe actually addressing its history of colonialism, its lack of undoing of its racism against African people from Africa and people from Asia. It wants to funnel more energy and more funding into the right, as it always does. So you got to really watch that. Or you're all going to get denazified or freeze in the dark. So that's not a threat. That's just what certain countries might do if you fuck around. But the United States, coming back to the prison labor. So my point is that all these accusations about what people are doing is all bogus, right? Because not all of it, but I mean, what the U.S. is saying, generally speaking, is bogus. And whenever they talk about human rights, they certainly cannot be trusted. All of their media, which is all of European, DW News, France 24, BBC, they all go along. They've all been going along with this the whole time. Canada, New Zealand, and all of the, like across, like left, right, and center in the West has been going along with this stuff because they're all afraid. Either they're too stupid, either they're complicit, they're malicious, evil, terrible people, or they're too afraid. They know it. They know it's false, but they go along with forced labor accusations because they just, I mean, and sometimes they're legitimately afraid because they want to keep their jobs, and capitalism means they're going to be homeless, right? Other times, but if they say too much, but that's also a problem. I mean, you can't. How do you can't have it? So you can't have you can't have an educated pop. I would argue you cannot have a capitalist country that has an educated population, right? Because it requires vast numbers of the people to not understand basic economics and history to maintain capitalism. So that alone, the fact that you have these countries, is part of the problem. And anyway, but we're way off Resident Evil. Let's get back to Resident Evil. And I didn't even talk about biological warfare yet. So when it comes to biological warfare, though, there is a history of biological warfare conducted by Europeans, colonizer countries, colonizer peoples, against indigenous peoples and other peoples. Diseases like smallpox, this is a whole thread I have. Diseases like smallpox have been weaponized by colonizers to eliminate Native Americans. They tried the same on Native Hawaiians, but we used contact tracing, lockdowns, and vaccines and universal healthcare, which we invented, to prevent biological warfare from wiping out our people. So this is I made this thread. I kind of re-update some of the older threads and repost them, but it's from within the COVID era. This is from an art. Somebody asked me, "Where'd you get this article from?" If you want, I'm gonna go back to the original article. But this is an article about the history of the United States' weaponization of plague. Not just like accidentally somebody got sick. No, like intentionally wiping out indigenous populations with smallpox, intentionally brought, and then taking all the land. It was common practice for explorers to capture Indians, take them to Europe, and sell them into slavery for 220 shillings apiece. Another common practice among European explorers was to give smallpox blankets to the Indians. Since smallpox is unknown on this continent prior to the arrival of Europeans, Native Americans did not have any natural immunity to the disease, so smallpox would effectively wipe out entire villages with very little effort required by the Europeans. From 1615 to 1619, smallpox ran rampant among the Wampanoags. They lost 70% of their population to the epidemic, and Massachusetts lost 90%. That's why when the Pilgrims arrived, they found well-cleared fields, which they claimed for their own. It was to them the wonderful preparation of the Lord Jesus Christ by his providence for his people's abode in the Western world. So again, also I have a whole stream just about the Christianity, religion, demonicness, and witches in the context of colonialism, capitalism, racism, and what the world generally. Where was that one? I swear to God I did one, but maybe I didn't. Oh, the Hellfire Club, Stranger Things, and Demonization. So again, I don't hate everything about Stranger Things. Like I said, I don't hate everything. My favorite things about it are the Hellfire Club, Eddie, and the way that that stuff plays out in the show. Again, like the things that are like internal to existence inside of places like the United States is pretty good. But so demonization. So one of the justifications, as I said, is that because indigenous people are not Christian, they deserve to go extinct and be killed by our plague. They deserve to be killed, right? Because it wasn't just plague. Of course, it was scalping, slaughtering indigenous people, especially women and children. One of the U.S. presidents, right, the guy on the $20 bill, right, Andrew Jackson, on the $20 bill, he actually ran on slaughtering. He ran on, I was the greatest colonizer in eastern United States because I killed so many women and children. He actually bragged, and importantly, it's not just because he was a bad guy. This is not a bad apple. The concept of the bad apple is a problem in the Western world because it's not a rotten apple; it's a rotten pie. The whole entire orchard is festering at the roots, and it's ridden through with termites, and all the trees are sickly and covered in rust and poxes, smallpoxes. Maybe wash your hands in your ass one time. Also wear a mask. Anyways, Andrew Jackson ran for the other racist white settlers who wanted to expand because the Northerners were less. Some of people are called like maybe we shouldn't expand too far. Maybe we shouldn't because they're the richer white settlers were gaining a lot of money and they didn't want the new white settlers to take too much of their pie. So there's always Britain also like don't expand past this point, not because Britain cares about indigenous people west of the Mississippi, but because Britain is thinking of its own British white capitalist colonialist interests and going, well, we don't want America to get too powerful and challenge us. Kind of like America going, oh, France, don't get too powerful and challenge me with your Alstom Electric Corporation and your tech corporation. Oh, Japan, don't get too powerful and challenge me with your Toshiba. So it's inter-imperialist, inter-feudal capitalist colonialist racist imperialist rivalries, right? And Andrew Jackson was on the side of the new racist settler murderers, and he said, I killed thousands of women and children. And then lots of white men from Europe said, yeah, Irish, German, Swedish, other people from Europe, they said, yeah, that's right, Andrew. Kill those indigenous women and children, clear the land for us. And he became president. So importantly, it's because America is still, it's based on settler colonial genocide, it still is. Right? He was more it was safer to be vocal about how you love massacring, imprisoning, enslaving black and brown people in his time. He literally, that's what he ran on. It's not like he did that and I am sorry for my ways. Thoughts and prayers for all the victims of my police murders. I'm sorry, my clearing of the land. No, he was like he just proudly celebrated. It's kind of when America said, "We are the American empire now." Now they say, "Oh, we're just the rules-based order." Right? China is the empire. We're just the rules-based international order. We're just following the rules, right? But in the time in the 1890s, it was cool to call yourself an empire because that got everybody going. And lots of Americans, they were like cheering. They were like, yeah, we took from coast to coast. It is America now. And we're going to expand to the Philippines and Hawaii in the 1890s. But now it's like, oh, we're not, it's not like we run this whole planet. We're just like the rules-based order. So it's really, the U.S. has not changed. It's just like, it's just altered its PR copy. That's all it's done. The West has not changed at all. Zero. It's gotten worse. Way worse. This guy was a racist murderer and he became president of the United States running on it. Kind of like Donald Trump ran on racism and he also became president. It's not because the working class was upset. It's because they wanted to secure a future for white children, just like the 1488. That's what the U.S. runs on. You got to really get clear about this stuff. Otherwise, you're going to be confused and you're going to think that there's some kind of future for the United States as an entity. The United States massacred indigenous people with knives, with guns. Every white settler was required to have pounds of ammunition and dozens of bullets so that at any time it could be called on not to defend against tyranny, but no, to go out into the wilderness, right? Which was actually regenerative agriculture of beans, corn, and squash growing in a way that maintained ecology and fed the people for thousands of years. The responsibility of the white male settlers was to go out and shoot indigenous people with the Second Amendment is a responsibility to massacre women and children and also men of the brown type. That's what the Second Amendment is. Remember that. If anybody brings up Second Amendment, that's why when this gun control comes up, black and brown people are like, I'm not into that because the Second Amendment was not given to black people. The slaves were not allowed to bear arms. Indigenous people were not given the right to bear arms. They didn't count as humans. The United States Second Amendment is not to defend against tyranny. It's to prepare it's for the population to commit genocide. The Second Amendment is the genocide amendment. It's called, you have the right and responsibility to genocide indigenous people so we have more space for white people and black slaves. That's what the Second Amendment is about. So it's not the right to bear arms. It's the responsibility to wipe out some Indians. That's what the Second Amendment should say. But they don't say that because that was embarrassing. So the indigenous people, I know that's hard to hear, so some white people just left, but you got to deal with that. Otherwise, you're not going to be fighting the right battle. You're going to be playing laser tag on the Death Star. They lost. That's why Elon Musk and his daddy are having all the kids. And Elon Musk is making children with all of his executives at his companies, right? And he's backing Tucker Carlson is the most popular show in the United States because that is the United States. It's a white racist genocide factory. So So there's 70%. So this is not like, oh, maybe accidentally. No, people were wiped out to make space for racist capitalist slave owners. If anything, Britain was like, maybe don't do the slavery part, and America's like, no, we want the slavery part. There's a little bit of shreds of ethics in Europe, and they're like, maybe slavery is, maybe that's a shade too far. Maybe slavery is beyond the pale. I mean, yes, kill 27 million Indians, yes, extract the resources and treat them like garbage, have coolies, and laugh at them and call them the N-word and have colonies, but don't enslave them. And America said, no, let's do all of it and then enslave them too. And so that's why a point I made last week is the United States is the world's largest white settler colony by a factor of 5 plus. That is all as much as anything else the most important fact about the United States. It is 330 million people. The next closest is Canada with 37 million. So it's literally a factor of 10. The U.S. is by far the world's largest genocide, slavery, which is not abolished, by the way. That's why I was just showing you with the forced prison labor guy. Arizona would collapse without prison slaves. The U.S. is the world's largest genocide-based settler colony where an entire population came to a new place, wiped the entire people out, installed a new culture, and has proceeded to maintain that system for the last 250 years. And that, more than anything else, that's the difference between Europe and America. America is like Europe on steroids. It's like Euro colonizer, hyper accelerated. It's like we not only are we going to extract and plunder other places, we're going to like delete this entire people off the face of the earth. And everything that we do here is going to be a complete abject lie. Like Europe, at least some things about the people, like there's people that have lived there, and you go deep enough, there's at least the people that are there came from people that were there before that. There's people for centuries and centuries or millennia. They've kind of survived there. They've all had a lot of violence and suffering there, but they're basically, from France or from Britain for the most part. The United States is an entire place where people from one place wiped an entire people out and continue to wipe those people out and build their entire country on an abject lie, absolute lie. And everyone gets filtered into the concept of whiteness and Americanness. And if you don't abide by it strong enough, well, you go to prison. In the world's largest, the U.S. out incarcerates Europe. The U.S. out bombs the world beyond Europe. The U.S. out capitalisms Europe. The U.S. out hegemonies Europe. The U.S. outdoes Europe because the U.S. is the greater ultra Euro force in the world. It's just more European than Europe in a certain sense. I mean, not to say that. Underneath there are indigenous cultures somewhere buried deep. It's hard. A lot of it's been erased, unfortunately, by the history of its last 5 centuries to 2,000 years, depending on how you count. But the U.S. took whatever possible line back to a healed European or what a healed German, Irish, French, or British person would be. And it just like cut that off, and it got no. We're gonna just erase everything. We're just gonna be the most disgusting thing possible. Absolute lies and absolute violence and absolute capitalism, with no looking back. Right? I mean, that's part of people go like, there's not really a future for the United States. It's because it doesn't have a past. It's like a whole cloth constructed genocide and slavery and imperialism factory, and you cannot like look away from that. The second you look away from that fact, when it's confronting you, you've already lost the possibility of a future that isn't horrible for the people of the United States. When you look into the past and you go, wasn't it great when there was a Cold War? No, it wasn't. No, it wasn't. The rest of the world was living in terror, suffering under your Iron Curtain, suffering under your military threat. That was not great. It was great for cis white dudes in the 50s. The women were all the help. Black people were all, the women were all the indentured servants, and the black people were all basically slaves in your house, getting beat up and crushed, and cops. And then Martin Luther got his head shot off, and then Hampton got his head shot off, and Malcolm X got his head shot off, and nothing changed. The United States has never had democracy, freedom, human rights, any ethical anything to stand on. And so that's why I'm going a little hard on that. But if you cannot face that, right, then there is no hope. Then you're just gonna fall apart. You're gonna be deluded till I don't know, something really bad happens. But anyways, they lost 70% of their population to the epidemic in Massachusetts. That's why the Pilgrims, when they arrived, found well-cleared fields that they claimed for their own. It was to them the wonderful preparation for the Lord Jesus Christ by his providence for his people's abode in the Western world. Okay, let's go to the Glenford article. This is actually from the Black Agenda Report. It's from an article called "The End of the American Thanksgiving: A Cause for Universal Rejoicing" by Glenford. I think Glenford unfortunately passed away recently. Nobody but Americans celebrates Thanksgiving. It is reserved by history and the intent of the founders as a supremely white American holiday, the most ghoulish event on the national calendar. No Halloween of the imagination can rival the exterminationist reality that was the genesis and remains the legacy of the American Thanksgiving. So, I mean, this article goes even harder than I have. So, you go read this article if you want. It is the most loathsome, humanity-insulting day of the year, a pure glorification of racist barbarity. It is more. Thanksgiving is more than a lie. Were that simple, a historical correction of the record of events of 1600s Massachusetts would suffice to purge the flaw in the national mythology. But Thanksgiving is not just a twisted fable. The mythology it nurtures is itself inherently evil. The real-life events subsequently revised were perfectly understood at the time as the first definitive triumphs of the genocidal European project in New England. The near erasure of Native Americans in Massachusetts and soon after for most of the remainder of northern English colonial seaboard was the true mission of the Pilgrim Enterprise, Act 1 of the American Dream. African slavery commenced contemporaneously and overlapping and ultimately inseparable Act 2. The last act in the American drama must be the root and branch eradication of all vestiges of Act 1 and 2, America's seminal crimes and formative projects. Thanksgiving is presently celebrated. That is, a national political event is an affront to civilization. Let me see if I can get the one about the... Yeah. So, because we're talking about... This is again, I'm going to be out of here soon. It's 1 o'clock. But Resident Evil, I was talking about Resident Evil, right? And a biohazard and your lies, right? The lies about this is the part of the lie about the slavery that you don't have, but you do. 2.5 million people doing slave labor, openly admitted by Arizona. The 13th Amendment didn't abolish slavery; it just moved it into. The 13th Amendment is actually a good example of what I was saying earlier, right? The 13th Amendment is a good example of the West does not get better; it gets better. It gets better at lying. The 13th Amendment moved the slaves from open chattel, unsightly ownership of black bodies into prisons that gives a bogus justification. Well, they threw their own life away, and that's why they're making Oval Office chairs and desks with star-spangled laptops on them for 25 cents an hour. All of the Biden administration and every administration's furniture is made by slave labor in prisons, mostly black people in DC. So that's just that's one of the many, there's tens of billions of dollars worth of slave labor, prison labor done per year. California's wildfires are put out by black chain gangs with white cops. It looks like like a slave era a scene when you take a picture of it. White cop, black chain gang for $1 an hour, risking their lives putting out California wildfires. And then they all died from COVID in 2019. So I guess you're going to have bigger wildfires because all you kill all your black prison slaves. So, the U.S. has not gotten better. It's gotten better at lying. Thanksgiving is one of the methods of covering its ongoing horribleness. The creation of the festive and heartwarming holiday of Thanksgiving is one of the that's the progress that has been made, which is we got really good at covering all the dead bodies who died from smallpox and scalping. Right? That's the getting better, right? So coming back to yeah. So I'm trying to find my Resident Evil one. So that that's what's underlying the what I wanted to ultimately talk about when I'm trying to rear load that talking about the thing I want to talk about. But Resident Evil and weaponized disease, right? So the disease was spread intentionally, right? Let's read a little bit about that. English settlers, their ostensibly religious venture backed by trading company, were glad to discover they had landed in a virtual cemetery in 1620. Corn sprouted in the abandoned fields of the Wampanoags, but only a remnant of the local population remained around the fabled rock. In letter to England, Massachusetts Bay Colony, John Winthrop wrote, "But for the natives in these parts, God hath so pursued them as for 300 miles space the greatest part of them are swept away by smallpox, which continues among them, so as God hath thereby cleared our title to this place. Those who remain in these parts, being in all not 50, have put themselves under our protection." If you're under American protection, that's like being under the American cops' protection. That's like a black 14-year-old under a white cop's protection. Or another brown or black cop, because the Uvalde cops, it's some of the worst when you're killing and imprisoning your own people. Kamala Harris is one of those great examples of selling out your own black people for prison time by arguing that you should have extended sentences for marijuana minor users, which is what Kamala did. She put her own people in prison. So that's the kind of protection that the United States provides people. Ever diligent to claim their own advantages of God's will, the Pilgrims thank their deity. Let me see if I can find the so it is unalloyed racist propaganda tale that endures because it served the purpose of a succession of the Pilgrims' political heirs in the same way that Nazi-enhanced mythology of a glorious Aryan German past advanced another murderous expansionist mission. Another common practice among European explorers was to give smallpox blankets to Indians, since the smallpox was unknown on this continent prior to the arrival of Europeans. I already read that one earlier, but so I'm just reiterating that they would intentionally bring the smallpox blankets. Most of the Wampanoag died from smallpox epidemic, so Pilgrims arrived. They found well-cleared fields, which they claimed for their own. A Puritan colonist quoted a Harvard University's Perry Miller praised the plague that had wiped out the Indians, for it was, as I said already, the wonderful preparation for our Lord Jesus Christ. His providence, the eye of providence, on your money, the eye of providence is the eye of God smiling down on, as I said, annuit coeptis. This word that's is on the dollar bill next to the eye of providence on the pyramid on the back of your dollar bill. Annuit coeptis is a Latin phrase that means he favors or it favors. It being God. If you were a deist, it was it, like Mr. Jefferson. If you believe God was a he, like most Europeans, until they started co-opting indigenous creator religions, like they co-opt everything else and steal everything else, including Maslow's pyramid, stolen and badly contorted from Blackfoot actual wisdom. Annuit coeptis means God approves. What does God approve of? God approves of all of the. God approves of this disease. Right? It approves our undertakings. It approves of this disease killing and slaughtering millions of people. God, when I scalp and I cut the head off of this Indian, when I take the skin off of this Indian child or woman or adult, God approves. That's what that every American dollar has war crimes. I mean, war criminals. Every American president is a war criminal. So they've run the U.S. military, and people like Andrew Jackson literally slaughtered thousands of innocent people to get to his job and bragged about it. On the rear side of every dollar is one of the most horrible, atrocious sayings of all time, which is that God approves of genocide and slavery. That's what that actually means. Novus Ordo Seclorum is the New World Order, which will be like the Euro-colonial, horrible, atrocious order, but even worse. So that is what the symbology. Now the American settlers, right, the Jeffersons and the Abraham Lincolns and the Washingtons and the Hamiltons, they didn't think of it that way. Obviously, they just thought this was a great thing we're doing because they're self-deluded, horrible people. But what it actually means is we will build a new world, even worse than Europe, which they succeeded. That's why America is wagging Europe right now, the biggest imperialist country in the world, threatening everyone with nuclear, biological, chemical, and conventional Armageddon. Because the U.S. has built a new world order, even worse than Europe, with Euro spiritual descendant, black poison coming across. The poisonous Euro roots are coming through, but it is a new world order that it has built. It's a new rules-based order, right? Built on God smiling over the dead bodies of indigenous people and stolen black slaves. That's what that actually means. So, but people don't understand that that's not what they, it didn't mean that, but that's what it amounted to when they made that symbol on the back of the dollar. Wonderful preparation for Lord Jesus Christ by his providence for the people's abode in the Western world. Historians have since speculated endlessly on why the woods in the region resembled a park to the disembarking pilgrims in 1620. The reason should have been obvious. Hundreds, if not thousands, of people had lived there just 5 years before. In less than 3 generations, the settlers would turn all New England into a charnel house for Native Americans. Fire the economic engines of slavery throughout English-speaking America. Plymouth Rock is the place where the nightmare truly began. It is not at all clear what happened at first, and only integrated Thanksgiving feast. Only 2 written accounts of the 3-day event exist. One of them, Governor William Bradford, was written 20 years after the fact. Was Chief Massasoit invited to bring 90 Indians with him to dine with 52 colonists, most of them women and children? Seems unlikely. A good harvest had provided the settlers with plenty of food, according to their accounts, so whites didn't really need the Wampanoags' offerings of 5 deer. What we do know is that there has been lots of tension between the two groups that fall. John Two Hawks, who runs the Native Circle website, gives a sketch of these facts. Thanksgiving did not begin as a great loving relationship between Pilgrims and Wampanoag, Pequot, and Narragansett people. In fact, in October 1621, when the Pilgrim survivors of their first winter in Turtle Island sat down to share their first unofficial Thanksgiving meal, the Indians who were there were not even invited. There was no turkey, no squash, cranberry sauce, or pumpkin pie. A few days before this alleged feast took place, a company of pilgrims, led by Miles Standish, actively sought the head of a local Indian chief, and an 11-foot-high wall was erected around the entire Plymouth settlement for the very purpose of keeping Indians out. There was no Thanksgiving. There was thanks murdering. Or there was no Thanksgiving. There was thankless slaughter, including biological warfare. So my point there is that, like, coming back to why am I talking about this at all? Resident Evil is a movie and a show and a video game series from the perspective of, the people in Japan, they have colonizer aspects to their history, right? Of course, especially against indigenous people in Okinawa, and they have imperial and fascist atrocities that they've committed. But it is a people looking into the United States from that perspective, making a game, because Resident Evil is made by a Japanese company, right? The original game was not made by the United States. It was made by was it Capcom? Pretty sure it was Capcom. The Japanese company that originally made it was Capcom. And in the time period where the United States was attacking Japan, by the way, it was in the 90s, the U.S. was crushing Japanese companies trying to build to stop yellow peril, right? Like it did to, as I said, other rivals, right? Getting close to it was kidnapping Toshiba executives and trying to stop it from surging. So in a weird way, Biohazard is also a reflection of like that. It's not the same. I don't want to equate it to the Black Agenda Report, but it is not America looking at itself. It is Resident Evil, and generally, right, when it's especially in this show, which is like kind of calling a lot of things, calling out a lot of biological warfare the U.S. has committed. It's looking at what America has historically done and continues to do, right, and then saying and going, well, this is terrible stuff, and you should stop doing that. Right, and so the biohazard is part of that. But back to the history of the diseases, right? So that was just one. The wiping out of indigenous people in Turtle Island, millions and millions of people, was just one of the instances of weaponization of disease by colonizers. Now, but let's come to Hawaii. So in Hawaii, as I said earlier, Hawaii was a place where they tried to wipe Native Hawaiians out. In this book, Hawaii's Story by Hawaii's Queen, Liliuokalani elaborates on how there was a ship. Specifically, the ship was called the Quinta. This is a excerpt from this book written by one of Hawaii's leaders. In socialist, anti-racist, economically equal, technologically advanced country, Hawaii, similar to where China is now, it was written in the 1800s when Hawaii had a higher literacy rate by far than every other European country, including the United States, and had a universal healthcare system. When the U.S. and nowhere in the West really has universal healthcare to this day, Hawaii had actually free healthcare, no strings attached, unlike Canada, which is treating disabled people terribly and has terrible access to healthcare, by the way, as well. Less hospital beds than the terrible United States in Canada. So I would argue there's no Western country that has real universal healthcare, because you can't have universal healthcare if you're racistly treating black and brown people, which Europeans do, along with the United States, to terrible economic circumstances. If you have capitalism, you can't really have universal healthcare, I would argue, because you are already making unlivable the basic material conditions and environmental conditions that would lead to decent health are not there. So Hawaii had full housing, basically, had full universal healthcare, had full free healthcare, no questions asked, and had the world's highest literacy rate, and had public mass transit, trolleys, buses, and trains. And so this is the story from that time. The U.S. destroyed Hawaii and couped our country to get rid of this, right? I talk about this all the time. But coming to how Hawaii dealt with diseases. So in this book, there's a point at which the United States is sending ships, or ships are coming from the West with white captains and white crews filled with smallpox, specifically to wipe out the Native Hawaiian population. One of those ships, this book, this commentary from the Queen is about the Quinta, just one of these ships, and it's actually the elected leader. But anyway, Liliuokalani noted, only after this white ship departed, some of the people who had deserted the ship reported that people who had died. Now the ship had claimed that the ship's crew claimed that the Chinese were carrying the plague, right? The Asians have historically been blamed, right? Wuhan flu, Chinese are blamed for the diseases, and that was just the justification for burning of the Chinatown. It was really for eradication of Asian and Hawaiian cooperative business and wealth and anti-imperialism. That's what that was about. That's what burning Chinatown is about. It's kind of like burning Black Wall Street or burning prosperous black areas and bombing them, which the U.S. has done. It's because they're afraid of, right? You notice when white people get rich, they don't blow up your entire little community. You notice that? It's because, there's a reason for that. Only after the ship departed, this white ship, did some of the people deserted that ship report the people who had died had succumbed to smallpox. And there were 2 Chinese on King Street who had mild symptoms of disease. However, in my understanding, the disease was not seen among the Chinese passengers of the ship. Outside of the 2 Chinese, and the disease spread to our ship from the white crew of that ship. What does that mean? White crew and captains were coming to Hawaii with knowingly having the plague and dying by it, because they don't have basic hygiene practices like hand washing, cleaning themselves, distancing. Look at Europe and the U.S. and the Western world today, dying with 25 layers of brain fog and Kawasaki exploding heart syndrome and COVID-19 times 12, right? How's China doing? 5,000 deaths. Barely any COVID. So the Chinese were blamed for the plague that the white people were bringing. Chinese rail companies in their internal memos, by the way, like the Vanderbilt, Robber Baron era, when they were bringing the Chinese as coolie labor to work, they actually intentionally brought Chinese because inside of their own notes, corporations said the Chinese had exceptional hygiene practices. So capitalist white Americans knew the Chinese were better at preventing spread of plague and then blamed them for spreading plague. So again, you just say America is doing 2.5 million people plus worth of forced slave labor of ethnic minorities, black people. And the U.S. is going, Chinese are doing all the forced labor with no concrete evidence in Xinjiang. Even their own investigators coming back and going, I don't find any evidence, and then getting fired, right? You see how this works? This is not equal. China is not the United States. I mean, China's not a perfect country. This is the Chinese people and the I'm sorry, white people, but and white inside people, Western people. These are not the same. One people project everything that they are doing terribly onto other people and benefit from that some more, and the other people are just like being honest and shit. One people is spreading disease and plague and blaming other people and using biological warfare to wipe out indigenous people, like Native Americans. Historically, for centuries, not just Native Americans, Native people, all Central, South America, all around the world, America has been doing this. Europe has been doing this for centuries, right? And then other people are just like not spreading plague, but being blamed for all the spread of the plague. So, anyways, okay, so it's amazing. It's amazing stuff, but nobody says that in English because they got to keep their university, corporate, government, or NGO job so they can make money in capitalism and survive. Anyways, because you say a good thing about China, you lose your journalist, academic, tech, STEM, writing, marketing job or government job. So anyways, so I'll do it for you. Consider supporting us on Patreon and Ko-Fi so we can keep doing that. In my understanding, me and Danny Haifong, in my understanding, the disease was not seen among Chinese passengers of the ship outside of the 2 Chinese, and the disease was spread to the crew of the ship. So my point is that, so you see what I'm saying, right? The U.S. tried to wipe Native Hawaiians out. They failed because Hawaii had the world's first universal healthcare system and had modernized hygiene practices and learned quickly and picked up on international human technology and human biological and medical practices, best practices, and implemented them. Emma Kalani Kamaka Kaleleo Nalani Naea Rook, right? What the mother of universal healthcare, 1859, brought about the world's first universal healthcare. Went around. I've spoken about her on many occasions. She raised money on foot to fund the world's first universal healthcare, which provided no charge medical services. Also started a women's school for nurses. And also did a variety of other things, really amazing things. By the way, Das Kapital wasn't written for another 8 years. So I'm not. This is not to dunk on Marx. I'm just saying, indigenous people already knew, and were practicing socialism, communism, etc., without having to have a white guy read back their own multi-century and 1,000-year-old lifeways to them. I just want to bring that up. 8 years before Das Kapital, we already had and the reason why we weren't wiped out even further, like a lot of some indigenous tribes are just gone forever because of biological warfare. Hawaii survived the biological warfare because we were doing actual socialism and anti-racism better than any other country in the world, I would argue, and certainly better than any Western country, US, Europe, you name it. If we hadn't, we would have just been all gone. As one example, right? This is Queen's Hospital. As part of that system of healthcare, on top of the strict quarantines of all persons infected during one of these smallpox. This is like somewhere from a story of Hawaii by Hawaii's queen. A strict quarantine of all persons infected or under suspicion was maintained, and so scrupulously and serious a thing it was to confine the ravages to the city of Honolulu, in which there were some 800 cases and about 300 deaths. So again, because of contact tracing, lockdowns, vaccinations. By the way, Hawaii's leaders, and Emma was one of them, I believe, actually took an actual vaccine publicly to show everyone that they were safe. And there were no anti-vax rallies. There were no anti-mask rallies. They didn't really understand the masking at the time as global human technology. That's important. Colonizers stole all their technology, most of it. Paper and black power stolen from China. So it's not really Westerners, colonizers taking credit for other people's feats. Actually, I'm writing a song called Give Founding Ancestors Their Due. It's called Founding Ancestors. It's about all the Black, Brown, Asian, Turtle Island, Pacific peoples that have all of their great successes in technology and history and knowledge and math and science and biological practices and hospital system, which was invented by Muslims, by the way, have all been buried. And white people take credit for everything. So Hawaii didn't invent everything, obviously, but Also invented things like universal healthcare, including subaquatic vehicles, and also invented new ways of managing mass transit systems, and also implemented socialism before Karl Marx finished his fucking book. So, which he stole from indigenous people in East Coast that people like him murdered. Specifically the Iroquois. Anyways, so the I'm not Carl specifically, I'm saying Europeans. Confined its ravages to the city of Honolulu. So Hawaii survived the mass attacks. Hawaii survived biological Resident Evil 1850, right? Resident Evil is a U.S. corporations and Western corporations and government interests, intentionally making weapons and those causing mass death and destruction, right? So Hawaii survived the U.S.'s Resident Evil bioweapon attack with actual existing socialism, I would argue, and actual existing and Hawaiian with socialism with Hawaiian characteristics, and by having strong medical masking, distancing, so quarantines, very strict lockdowns, nobody in and out of the city, and in and out of certain districts, right? Everybody's freaking out about that in the U.S. and Canada and Europe, and there hasn't really been a single actual lockdown. They never enforced it because America's white racist Nazi cops are incapable or unwilling to ask their own white racist Nazi brothers and cousins to wear masks. That's actually the secret, which is the U.S. is full of complete nut jobs, religious zealots, uneducated people, idiots, who are all riled up by ruling charlatans and Pied Pipers, the Trumpians, and being told that Jesus is your vaccine. This is the sad secret, which is that the West will die of its incapability to actually implement any collective health measure. So it's just fucking around right now. So Biden's like, well, whatever. I want to get voted in. So whatever attempt to ask you to mask and vaccinate and do basic and lockdowns. I need the cops to lock up black and brown and poor people. And I can't make the cops all enforce mask mandates that they want to enforce. So I guess we're all fucked. So you and your community just put on your N95. And soon you will be surrounded by 25 layers of Omicron, Epsilon, Delta, brain fog zombies, and survive the zombies. I mean, you when you get brain fog 6 times and you have 2 strokes, you're gonna have about the level. You're gonna have a lot because when you have a stroke, you damage parts of your brain. You become more violent and irritable, and then you become stupider and less competent, just like a zombie. And soon the U.S. will be surrounded by actual Resident Evil zombies. Everyone who's not masking, distancing, and vaxxing. And you just gotta survive U.S. biohazard Resident Eviling itself. And also Europe, by the way, because they're all doing the same thing. And all of the capitalist world is just gonna. That's why I kind of said, right, that's the topic of the stream was. It's about the Western historical weaponization of smallpox, blankets, malaria, cholera, biolabs, Western weaponization of COVID today, resulting in shooting itself in the zombified foot and the brain fog brain. So, I mean, I hope I'm not saying that's what's actually going to happen. I'm trying to be a little bit entertaining. So I hope that it's not what's going to happen. But you can't control what everyone else in the United States does, unfortunately. But you can control what you do, and I do recommend that you don't get COVID-19 and don't spread it. Like what what successful countries are doing, like China, Vietnam, Cuba. People that are not losing 25% of the workforce. Actually, I did a count at 100,000, 1 million people are unofficially getting COVID per day at this current rate, and it's growing. It could be 2 million a day soon. It's about 100 to 200,000 per day, and it's 10 times higher than that. Is what actual scientists and epidemiologists, pandemic specialists have said. It's about 10 times higher uncounted cases if you count all of the home testing that's not reported, etc. If you take the BA4, BA5 variants and you put it together, you're getting about 2 million to 2 million new cases per day. If you take a low estimate, 10%, 100,000 people are developing long COVID, including brain fog, inability to walk. They can't work and they can't physically and mentally operate. They can't get out of their chair and go 50 feet, some of them, and they can't even think straight enough to write the sentences that they would be inputting into Excel spreadsheets, or doing shilling for Coca-Cola, or writing marketing reports, or they're doing their university paper correcting, whatever their job is. 10% of the population, 100,000 people, or 10% of those million people, 100 to 200,000, right, people per day is getting long COVID. That's what I'm saying. And a lot of that's going to be permanent. You're never going to get better from that. You're just permanently disabled, or more disabled. At that current rate, within 3 to 4 years, 95% of the United States will have permanent long-term disability with long COVID. Let me say that again. At the current rate, the U.S. is not solved. It's only getting worse. They're just, well, whatever. Don't wear masks. Don't vax. Do whatever you want. Even if you're vaccinated, you mild cases are causing long COVID. At the current rate, almost every person in the United States will be incapable of working. You will be, or not incapable. They'll be incapable, drastically reduced in their capability to work, to live, to think straight. I saw an article that said long COVID and brain fog is a blessing because with all of the climate and economic disasters and inflation, the brain fog is causing you to be so clouded in your mind that you don't get distressed about it because you can't think straight. That was the silver lining article. Did you see that one? That was really American article. There's a very Western article. It's good that everyone's getting sick and permanently disabled, because then we won't have to read about the sad news, because you can't read two words without falling asleep, or getting lost train of thought, or just completely zonking out because you have permanent brain fog. So that was a weird silver lining. I don't understand that one, but anyways, everybody's like, what the fuck is going on? No, but what that's saying is that's a signal that the United States is preparing to completely let it all rip, along with Europe, because they don't want Republicans to win, or I don't know. Each party is going to want to make it seem, each party is going to want to not do anything, because doing anything is government overreach and authoritarian Chineseness. If you ask people to wear a mask, our freedom and human rights are being taken, and we're becoming tyrannical, authoritarian, tanky land or something. And so nobody is ever going to want to lose an election and millions of dollars worth of Lockheed and Corrections Corps of America and Amazon lobbyist donations, right? Because that's what politicians are not representing you. They're representing rich people and making a lot of money and having nice lunches and buying yachts and shit, right? So no politician is ever going to do anything in the West ever again, just like Biden isn't, because nobody's going to lose an election. So everyone's just going to, get disabled and die. I'm saying, like, not everyone, but I mean the people of the United States, which never had a future to begin with, and now it definitely doesn't. It's going to Resident Evil itself. So you're going to be surrounded by zombies and lickers and frothing at the mouth, even more fucked up in the head, racist right-wing people, sputtering brain poison called COVID-19 is a lie made up by reptilian Soros Gates something, right? And we should all just eat beef and turmeric and cough in each other's mouths and spit in each other's faces, right? So you're going to be surrounded by the zombie, liberal and conservative zombies. So you're going to have to even more isolate. It's kind of like, zombie apocalypse. It already is the zombie apocalypse, except the zombies are just Westerners. And you're going to have to, it's not really anything that you can really, now I'm being a little bit hyperbolic. I hope it doesn't get that bad, but the trajectory doesn't look good. But what you have to do to survive that is to take the precautions seriously, and don't listen to whatever advice. This is how we didn't get COVID and how we had the true information earlier on. So I was listening. This is what I was figuring out. Oh my God, Vietnam really knows what the fuck they're doing. Look at what countries that actually are practicing socialism. Now you have to get past your own racism and your Western exceptionalism to accept that places like Vietnam, Cuba, China, especially Asian countries that are the best at this basic win-win socialist reality are. Places like Vietnam and China, etc., are actually like somewhat like much more successful societies and civilizations, and they're practicing socialism, which is about, you know, taking care and prioritizing the will and the needs of the people collectively, as a people, as governments, and as businesses, all that together, over the interests of capital, money, one race over others, right, etc. And if you accept that you know, then the information that those places are giving to their people is going to be better information, because, right, that's part of capitalism, is that in order to maintain economic differentials between the have and have not, you also have to maintain informational differentials. So you don't know shit about what is happening with COVID-19, because it's better for the rich to keep that secret and profit off it. It's literally how Wall Street operates. It's called information asymmetry, is actually what they call it. Without information asymmetry, it is impossible to operate a stock market, because, I mean, it's actually one of the theories in like high finance when you're learning about the Gaussian copula curve and mean value theory and portfolio theory, which is a bunch of crap, but there is a few things that are true, which is that if everyone has access to equal information, you know, in a hypothetical world, but I mean, nobody really has that, but if everyone has great access to information, like everyone knows that company X actually has some malfunctioning parts because of cheaping out on, I don't know, the airplane materials, right? Or Enron actually has hidden millions or billions of red ink that's going to cause secret losses to occur, and it's going to come to light later, right? It's called insider trading, but the reality is there is no stock market without insider trading. It's all insider trading. Everything's fucking insider trading, right? It's like, I know shit that you don't know, and that's why I'm going to buy this stock, because you don't know it. You're going to be a sucker, and I'm going to take your fucking money. So anyway, my point is that if you want good information about anything, I mean, and also if you want universal healthcare, housing, clothing, and all these, you need socialism, and you need like an actual functioning left of some sorts, not perfect, but like a country and people that are operating and moving in that direction, right? If you have a capitalist system and structure, the information you're going to be getting, as I already said, right? Like, you're not going to get education, because they have no interest, desire, and actually need you to not be educated. So, and I mean, the reason why the stock market works to benefit Wall Streeters is because the rest of the population is stupid, is another way to think about it. In order to have one investor make leaps and gains above others, it needs suckers coming in believing, right? That's how a Ponzi scheme works. You think you're getting paid out because this investment is going up, but what they do is taking all the new money in, taking 20% and paying out the older investors, and then running away with the money. But that's all of capitalism is a giant scam, and all of Wall Street is a scam. And by extension, information, right, under a capitalist system is going to be bad and generally incorrect if it's public. Now, internal information can be good, right? Because they need that, like Senator Loeffler Burr, that knew, based on CIA reports from China and an international investigation, that COVID was going to be as bad or worse than the Spanish flu. And then they bought, as I often bring up, they bought Amazon, and they bought Zoom stocks, and they sold off their hotel stocks, and their United Airlines, and their Hawaiian Airlines, and their Delta, and their American Airlines stock. Why did they do that? Because they had the inside information that the pandemic will cause mass global shutdowns, international borders to close, plane flights to stop, tourism and travel will plummet. And if I get in early, because I have asymmetrical information, you don't have it, you think that COVID's going to be, I don't know, it's a little flu, it's a little cold. You don't have it. They have it in January, and then that's how you make money. You make money by having better, not necessarily by having better education in terms of what's happening in the earth and in the world generally than other people. So that's why you have to be stupid in a capitalist system. The masses have to be stupid. Under feudalism, it's the same thing, right? That's why it's actually the reason why pawns can't move straight. The reason why pawns cannot attack straight forward, right, in chess, is because while pawns they can move forward, they cannot capture pieces directly forward. The reason is because if the pawn looks the opponent in the eye while they kill them, they will see only their own face, that of a worker. The truth will dawn on them that their enemy is their comrade and their king is the enemy. So for feudalism, for capitalism, for Westernism to work, everyone has to be stupid and diseducated. So don't listen to other people in the West. in the capitalist world. Don't listen to other organizations. Don't listen to the businesses, the government, the CDC necessarily. I mean, you can hear what they say, but I mean, don't follow them immediately, because none of these entities is going to be privy to excellent education, unlike the native Hawaiians, 98% of which had literacy and excellent educations. Only the highborn in America, only the millionaire and billionaire have access to entire research firms and private equity entities to collect and aggregate, or the central intelligence entities, which are connected to all of these corporate interests, corporate information entities, like what Edward Snowden was working for. Actual information is a privilege for the 7-figure to 9 and 10-figure net worth class. Like, excellent education was privy only to lords, ladies, marquise, duke, duchess, dauphin, kings, and queens under 1800s feudalism, where Hawaii had everyone at education. That's why you always see when socialism happens, mass high quality education, university attendance. Like, so Russia actually, the ISS is not going to work anymore without Russian help. The US is like, help, we can't make our space station work because we don't have enough people that actually have educations in the West. We just have giant private equity firms and giant hedge funds masquerading as colleges, where everyone gets an A for showing up and making a TikTok. And Russia, we need actual cosmologists and quantum physicists and scientists to do shit. So it's because not Russia is communist today, but they had a history of everybody getting massively educated, like Hawaii did, like places like Libya, millions of people with a high quality education for the first time, and then they killed Gaddafi. Bolivia, millions and millions of people getting a high quality education where millions were illiterate for the first time, and then Elon, we will coup whoever we want, Musk. So my point is that applies to information. So that's unfortunately the CDC is not giving very good information. Biden is over there just not doing anything. So I mean, this is coming to the present moment, where a world filled with mass disease that destroys civilization, that causes the streets to run red with poverty and blood and suffering, like Resident Evil, is a world where billions of people suffer and die. Well, not everyone dies, but many people suffer greatly and have deep destruction of their brain. COVID is already doing that to billions of people, right? So it's already like 25% of the Western world, which has been reinfected. The average person in the United States is another statistic. There's 80 million official counted cases. That's 800 million. 800 million and counting. That's actually more like 850 million unofficial cases in the United States. That means that it's enough for every person in the US to have COVID 2.5 times. And it's only a few years in. Again, that's why I say, if you look at the risk factors of COVID and the chances of long COVID, within 3 to 5 years, every person in America, or not every person, because some people are not, some people are like us, are like wearing our masks, social distancing, not going to any event or anywhere where people are unmasked, if as little as possible, right? But we're like a tiny minority of people. I hope there's more of them. I hope more people like start masking and distancing and getting their shots and doing the basic medical precautions that actual functioning civilizations like China and Vietnam and Cuba do. I hope that happens. But I mean, at the current rate, it's like 5 or 10% or less are actually following those precautions. So 90 to 95% of the United States will have long COVID, or worse, or be dead, or be like super physically and mentally disabled. I mean, far, far more than they were before. It's already high levels of, disability, etc., but even worse than they were before. And it's not, there's no version of the future where that gets better. This is just COVID. There's other terrible diseases coming out of the dying earth as the ecosystems go extinct. Monkeypox is just one of them. So that is Ed Yong was he's a scientist. He's like he was a Pulitzer Prize winning writer, and he's like an Asian guy in America. That's like being in hell already. You can be mass lynched at any second. Chinaman's chance. But Ed Yong is like, what the hell are we doing? What, Trump was an idiot, but Biden, what you do? It's not over. Yeah, I was just listening. Like he's like the scientists and the doctors that are of any kind of people that have any kind of honesty, right? Any kind of integrity are like, this is not done. This is getting worse. You're gonna have this. The variants are not just gonna stop happening because you wish it away. You know, the variants, Resident Evil, the zombies are not gonna go away because you just, oh well, if I just live free, right? That's like, imagine you're Resident Evil, you're rocking around with your shotgun. There's contorted upside down, human anthro like bodies that have like razor bladed tongues that can shoot 12 feet, come out lickers, right? You got pustule and sorbet and rabid Doberman pinchers chasing after you. You've got like giant like reptilian biohazard monsters. You got tyrants with 7-foot knife for hands coming at you, right? You got Mr. X with his tentacle porn arm coming out, and you're like, oh, well, I love that tentacle porn. I give it. Well, I mean, okay, date Mr. X, but then and Nemesis. But I mean, think about all the other stuff. I mean, okay, you like the tentacle guy, but think about all the other things that will kill you, right? It'd be like going, well, I'm going to go out into Raccoon City in the Resident Evil zombie-filled world, and I'm just going to like live out without fear and just walk. You can walk around without fear and get eaten by a zombie, or get your head chopped off by the tyrant. I'm going to walk around without fear. That's the attitude. It's like, just because you wish it was gone, it is not gone. But that's part of that is another layer of American and Western exceptionalism, which is that these things do not and cannot happen to me because what are you? What? Upper middle class, privileged, white, American? What? What? It didn't happen to me before. These don't happen to me. I go to parties and yoga and class. I go on vacation every year because that's what's it? What is it? Was the eye of God approve of you spreading plague to Hawaii? Just like the eye of Providence on the dollar bill atop the pyramid approved of white people vacationing to America and killing indigenous Potawatomi people with the smallpox blanket? Is that what that's what your divine right to massacre with biowarfare? Is that why you come into Hawaii with your plague? Or wherever the fuck you flying to? You shouldn't be flying. Planes is the number one place. You have 45 to 90 minutes of unfiltered air. It doesn't matter what they say. It's one of the number one places you get the pandemic. Why are you flying? I fly because I'm a university professor, and well, if you have to, some people got to fly for jobs. I get that. It's always like, that's the one thing. I'd be like, well, I got to fly because I got to go do emergency EMT services in this place because they ran out of doctors. Okay. But I'm flying because I have the divine right to take a vacation and give indigenous Hawaiians a plague and kill them. No, I mean, that's okay. All right, American. Like, okay, capitalist. Okay, Andrew Jackson. The plague is not over because you wish it was gone. The plague is not the biohazard, the biological warfare that is blowing back upon you, that was weaponized by Donald Trump to win an election. Oh, it's just a little Wuhan flu. It's their fault. He knew. Also, he has a phone conversation going, oh yeah, this is really bad. I better everybody stop testing and let's cover it up. Biden's doing the same thing. Everybody just pretend like COVID's gone and let everybody do at-home tests and play with the numbers. Just like Florida did when they fired the scientist that was reporting the numbers and was fired for refusing to alter the COVID data aggregation system for Florida. So just fire everybody who's honest about the numbers. Fire all the good scientists. Fire all the good doctors. Because I need it to look good so I can win the election and make another $500 million or whatever Biden gets paid. Fire all the honest people because we need to diseducate the population more and make them think that COVID's gone so I can get elected. Or whatever. Just diseducate you. Make them think that it's gone so that I can make a little more money here. Tell them everything's fine so everybody goes back to work and I can make more money here. As a corporate owner, goes back to their jobs, goes back to school. Kids are not getting it. Remember that? Kids don't get COVID, right? No, they do. And now you're killed. Now your kids are permanently disabled and you fucked your entire children's future and the future of your country. But we don't care because we don't care about anyone. We don't even care about our own future, apparently. So that's like, you're already in Resident Evil. You're already in the zombie apocalypse in a certain sense. Not It's not, not as obviously not as bad as that one where you literally there's nothing working and everyone's gonna eat your brains out, right? But this the COVID-19 is weaponized for elections. It was weaponized to make money. Now, I'm not saying don't take vaccines because large pharmaceutical companies like Pfizer made vaccines or AstraZeneca. We need vaccines, and you should get a vaccine. Whether it's a publicly made vaccine or a privately, unfortunately, made vaccine, we need vaccines. It's kind of like, I don't like that capitalist companies, made the gas I got to put in my car so I can get the food and stuff, but I still got to get the food and stuff, and I can't get the food and stuff because I don't have another way to get it here. So, I got to stream on this entity, and the internet comes through a capitalist entity, unfortunately. So in the same way, like, it's not great that, it would be better if publicly funded, a public health system like Hawaii had, right? Universal. It would be great if America had a Hawaii-like universal healthcare system that publicly funded vaccine research like Hawaii did, and that China does, and that other countries, Russia also does, right, with their Sputnik vaccines. It would be great if, like Cuba does, it would be great if the U.S. had publicly funded vaccines where the benefit and the extra revenue from the vaccines was going back to help masses of people, not enrich Pfizer executives. But because that's the vaccines we have, you got to take the vaccines because it does reduce spread, severity of illnesses, etc. That's not a silver bullet. Vaccine and mask and distance, but you still need to take those. But because I don't want people to get the wrong idea that I'm like, that's my stance. But it is the case that it would be better because you wouldn't have billions of dollars wasted giving rich people money they don't deserve, right? The CEO of Pfizer didn't invent the technology. It was scientists and researchers that had to study and do the work to invent the vaccines, right? In the same way that Elon doesn't deserve $200 billion to fart into a bag and then pop the bag on Twitter. And it's, COVID will be gone in April. Let me get that back. So Elon gets paid $200 billion in the last couple of years. That's how much he made. Based on current, this is the kind of genius that he drops out of his mouth, like Jordan Peterson, right? And by genius, I mean absolute garbage. Based on current trends, we'll be probably close to 0 new cases of COVID in the U.S. by the end of April 2020. So that's right. So anyways, this guy, when he said that, he actually probably caused negative $10 billion worth of damage because people listened to him and they said, okay, well, let's all just party and not lock down, right? So Elon has destroyed potentially trillions of dollars worth of economic productive value rather than created anything, right? So my point is that, so that's another dunk on him, which is that we should have the vaccines produced, but the vaccines should not be produced with the benefit of the surplus value of the scientists and workers going to the pharmaceutical companies. But however, like Resident Evil, there are terrible pharmaceutical companies, right? And they're like entities like Purdue Pharma and the Sackler family that made tens of billions of dollars, right? Over-prescribing and mal-prescribing opioids like the fentanyl and the OxyContin that got tens of thousands of people killed. 100,000 people died. 100,000 people died. It was actually reached peak opioid overdoses in 2021. At the same time as COVID was killing out more people than anything else, it's also like peak opioid at the same time. So, here's a fun fact. Not fun, but important fact. The life expectancy of China surpassed the U.S. by almost 2 years in 2021. So the healthy life expectancy of China was already ahead of the United States. The absolute life expectancy of China is now 78. U.S. is 76. So in that sense, China's already leapfrogged much more quickly than thought previously. The United States as well. So that happened. And that's one piece of data, but that's important to remember, right? If the U.S. says They're doing things wrong. China is doing X, but at what cost? China has zero COVID policy, but at what cost? We can't do zero COVID policy because look at what it costs. Well, what did it cost? What did it cost? China is economically growing still, is doing better than the United States. China has absolute poverty elimination. Everyone has access to a house. There's universal housing. They have a guarantee of access to your healthcare needs. How are you doing in America, by the way, for your healthcare? Oh, that's right. The healthcare system is falling apart and it can't handle another wave. That's another thing the doctor is saying. The U.S. healthcare doctors and nurses have resigned in the hundreds of thousands, and any more waves is just eradicating and destroying the hospitals. You don't know that until you go to try to get healthcare, especially in the continent, especially in areas that have been heavily hit by COVID, right? And that's actually and even if you wanted access, and that also impacts the reproductive rights care as well, because it's not like this is a completely separate system. Now, it's not the same as the hospital, but the health workers, they have a limited number of total nurses and spaces and all of the equipments and etc. And if you're running out of personnel in your hospitals because everybody's getting brain fog, dying, and being demoralized in your hospitals, that impacts all healthcare. And so what is the cost? What's the cost? There is no cost. China has saved 2 to 3 million people from death. It's saved hundreds of millions of people from permanent brain damage and physical damage from long COVID, right? That's how many people would have got long COVID in China if they had let the same amount of people. China would have had an equivalent of, let me get the number right. 2.5. China would have an equivalent of 3 billion COVID cases if it had the same rate of COVID cases as the United States. Okay, so China would have had 300 million, an entire America's worth at this point, of permanently brain fogged, permanently asthma, permanent long COVID damage. And that's how many people have been spared that drastic loss to their quality of life and in the mass disabling event, right? 300 million people is how many people they spared. So what is the value of being able to walk 100 feet without being winded and passing out? How would you rate that? Can you even put a dollar amount? Like if you like running marathons, swimming and diving and hiking and doing things out, most people like moving around generally, dancing, playing guitar. I mean, that takes energy. I do it all the time. Streaming takes energy, right? What is the value of living the next 50, 70 years of your life, being able to walk, run, hike, swim, interact with your friends and family? It's like there is no value to that, right? But so when the U.S. says, at what cost is the long-term health and quality of life for 300 million people? It's like it's infinite. China has given infinite amount of, like uncountable amount of benefit to its people. There's not really a cost. There's only a benefit, right? Now the cost is, you have to wear a fucking mask? Is that you gonna die on that hill? The U.S. is gonna be zombified and chew its own leg off and die on that hill. The West is, Europe is, Canada is, apparently Australia and New Zealand are. See about Japan. Everyone's gonna go die on that hill. Brazil is, as the American mirror image in South America. Everyone's gonna go die. I guess everyone's gonna go full Resident Evil then. So not recommended. I mean, I hope, again, I say that I hope not. I really hope not. I don't want that to happen. I'm going to be clear. I don't hope that people in the United States and the Western world die from or become permanently disabled by illnesses like COVID. I don't want that for anybody. I'm just saying that because that's the trajectory. I'm allergic to bullshit, and it's like I'm like constitutionally, ecumenically, and spiritually and epistemologically and ontologically required to tell you the truth because I made a deal with Satan / Lil Nas X's boyfriend and because I'm a demon or a person that is unacceptable to Western Christian culture. And that's what indigenous people are. So I can't bullshit you about that. Otherwise, that would not be very Hawaiian of me to make up bullshit and tell you it and sell it off and then make money from it. Even though people might want to hear bullshit and then feel better about themselves, but then hurt later and cause mass suffering. So, but that's what I mean. If I'm not saying everything I'm saying is 100% true. A lot of this I'm just cobbling together from what I'm gathering. But the numbers, you know, some people go, you can't trust the numbers over there. You can't trust these numbers. You can't trust these numbers. Again, yeah, you don't trust just one number. You got to look dialectically and historically comprehensively at the perspective and draw your own conclusions, do your own independent research, right? But the conclusions are that, I mean, at least the ones that I'm drawing. I might draw some different conclusions later on if things materially change. Like earlier on, I would have said, you know, I don't like Biden, obviously, but there was more. You know, they're like at least saying true things when it comes to COVID. Like, we need vaccines. People do need to wear masks, right? Now it's like, whatever, right? Now, so it's kind of that's changed. He's not the administration isn't saying COVID doesn't exist. Like that's kind of the Republican edge is. It's a little more anti-science, right? It's a little worse, but you know, well, whatever, just do whatever. Everybody independently find your own level of comfort and just choose whatever you want, right? That doesn't really help either. You know, not when like you have 25% of the population zombified. You go, well, you know, let's just see how many people we can zombify. Just everybody independently choose to get bitten or not. Just see what happens. Let's just see what happens. You should be like quarantining, right? Trying to stop the zombies, right? Trying to educate everyone to go, no. This is like way worse. It's not over, right? And so just going, you know, either going zombies don't exist, that's the Republican side, or, well, there's some zombies, but just whatever. Neither of those are actually a scientific approach. Neither of those are helpful approach. Neither of those are going to get where we need to go. So anyways, this is more COVID than you want to hear about. But anyway, I don't have much else to say about Resident Evil except I'm gonna watch some more of it. Holly can't watch it because zombies doesn't go well with Holly. So anyways, okay. So anyway, let's move on to this a little bit, and then it's already 2:05. Okay, 2 million deaths in the U.S. were never inevitable. Some countries have replicated 1800s Hawaii successes in containing COVID today. So I mean, just some hard numbers though. This is from about 3 to 5 months ago. Let me just get the number right now. U.S. COVID deaths. U.S. COVID deaths currently 1.2 million. Okay. These counts are not accurate. Scientists have also, doctors and scientists have said this is not really accurate because huge numbers of testing at home and it's all a lot of honor-based systems. So that's the numbers are never 100% accurate to begin with because you can't get every single person tested at all times. But if anything, China's numbers are places like China, Vietnam, Cuba. Those numbers were more accurate because they were doing much heavier testing, and they still are doing heavier testing. The U.S. has always done. It has under-tested. It is under lockdown. It is under mask. It has fallen short, along with the rest of Europe and these other places. It has always fallen short. So if anything, when people say you can't trust those numbers over there, it's if anything you can't trust those numbers over here. And not to say that it's untrustworthy, just like you have to gauge approximately. You have to use other things like what's the hospitalization rate, what's the level of long COVID, right? What's the you know this variety of tests like the wastewater rate of COVID positivity, etc. So you take all those things into account, right? Total positivity. So like I think half of the U.S. or more is 50% plus of COVID positivity rate. So it means like people that are getting tested, over half are coming out positive. So it means you have every other person in your state is positive with COVID, basically, give or take, right? So, but anyways, so the deaths currently stand at 1.2 million, and China's 5,000. So they had a little spike, you know. So it's again, they're not like they have zero. It's not like they have like zero deaths and zero cases, right? But they had a spike in the beginning. They had like they went up to like, you know, 1,000 a day, 4,000 a day. And then went 1, right? I don't know if you can see this. Okay, so they went for like 1, So they had a little Resident Evil-y beginning, and then they went 2020, nothing. I mean, just as a random day. Let's just choose a random day. 38 average. That's a high, right? 2020. 7-day average 22, 25. That's like for a country of 1.4 billion people, right? 2021, nothing. It's like a small, maybe there's like 200 a day for a little bit of January. And you have an Omicron spike here. That was like Shanghai and Shanghai, Shenzhen, the populous large port cities. You had a spike. The highest it went for a single day in a country that's 4 times the size of the U.S., right? 26,000 people per day. That was the peak, right? That's like that. When has the U.S. ever, right? The U.S. hasn't even gotten close to that. I feel like, the U.S. has never. The U.S. has never gotten to the point in the last year. The U.S. has never gotten close to the highest peak in the history, as a daily average case count. The U.S. has never gotten at its lowest point to the maximum peak in a country with 4 times the population for the entire pandemic. Right? It's like it's incomparable. It's incomparable. It's like I think if you were to take it statistically, you have 800 times more deaths per capita in the U.S. compared to China, and the cases wise, it's about the same, but it's not even close. Anyways, so and then now you're having like 120,000 per day. So that means you're getting. So the actual case count is like about 10 times that. So it's about 1.2 million per day. Anyway, I'm not just here to do statistical wonkery with you. Is to say that like the numbers are, it is not impossible to have a zero COVID policy, right? It's not impossible to have a zero COVID policy. You need not just a government. You need a government. You need business. You need people. You need way of existing, right? It's like, as I try to reiterate, yes, Marxism and end of capitalism, building socialism is important, but I would argue to build that you need as I said last week, end of queerphobia, patriarchal, inequality between genders, inequality between third genders, right, and sexism, and inequality between races, and also people need to view themselves, right? Because you can have a union that is at least ostensibly have Marxist-Leninists in it, but if people still view themselves as getting a better salary for themselves, right? So I'll be in the union until I get $40 an hour, and then I'm gonna kind of not participate. That's also right. That's not conducive to what. That's not really conducive to what you need. What you need is people that are in the union, not just for them and their fellow union, and in the union for themselves. They're in it for all people, right? For all of the earth. You need a deeper, wider perspective. I would argue an indigenous perspective, right? A non-colonial perspective, right? A non-selfish, non-Western perspective, really, right? A non-individual, rational self-interest perspective. A collective, communal, and atemporal or long-time perspective, as opposed to short-term and my life right now. It's all people and 7 generations from now. A deep ancestral spiralic perspective is another spiralic time, right? Where we are connected to the ancestors, our parents, and our children's children. Because if you can't think that way, and if everyone can't think that way, then you have individuals pursuing a better paycheck collectively for this union right now. So it's always going to be tactical and not in it for the long term and for all the people. So we need to have, and so that is part of the. I would argue the Chinese characteristics is actually very important. Like the socialism, important, yes. The Chinese characteristics, and part of that is the way of thinking about other people as a collective, and not you as an individual above them. Not that you say you don't have individuals, but thinking about yourself connected to your ancestors, right? You as part of as coming from this land and this village and this people. And connected through history and building collectively a future. That's part of the Chinese characteristics. That's actually very,
Each place will discover other places with their own characteristics. Now, I would argue, right? That's what one thing I argue is there is no socialism with U.S. characteristics if the United States is a settler colonial genocide project. You see what the problem happens, right? So that's what this thing is based on. You're missing, you're missing that cultural and the ontological and epistemological like base, right? The cultural base of who you are and how you are and what you are and how you are connected to the world. If you view yourself as an individual rational actor, right, as a making a homestead for myself and my family, it does not work. It does not work for pandemic. In the long run, it does not work for socialism. It does not work for maintaining collective health, collective maintenance of the environment, which is right. It's a hyper object, which is what? That's a widely spaced in both space and time entity, right? Like climate change, right? It doesn't happen on one day. It's not. No individual rational actor can address climate change. Even 1,000 of them cannot. It takes 8 billion non-individualistic collective actors living through Blackfoot communal perpetuation wisdom that was contorted into self-actualization by Maslow, a white colonizer, right? Where food, security, emotional needs at the top of its self-actualization, transcendence. That's where transcendentalism comes from. So Maslow's pyramid has to be not flipped; it has to be put right. Which I mean, and what that's the hard question is like where does that lead? What characteristics the socialism with what characteristics of the current people who identify as white Americans or as any kind of Americans, Hispanic American, Black American, what is it that is going to connect them to nature, to other people in an equal way, to people of different genders, to people of different to women, to people of different races in an equal way, and to their own futures, their deep futures. It's going to be socialism with what characteristics? Again, that's a question I do not have to answer. What I do know is like if you don't understand your own history and how you got here, you won't be able to address that history and then figure out what you will be, right? But I can tell you that like that's a problem that China doesn't really have, because they don't have a settler colonial reality. Now the U.S. likes to argue that, but they don't have that's not. They have other problems, and they have historical fights, and they have struggles internally. They're a long old family, and like all long old families, they got long sitting, upset. And remember that one time you Manchus did this to us, and you remember this one time that they have those problems, and they got to address those. But the entire reality of it is not we eradicated an entire continent and then built our bullshit on capitalism, slavery, and genocide. They have risen without mass war and bloodying entire continents, unlike the Europeans, whose all of their privilege and all of their wealth and their cities and their roads, their electricity, everything that they have, their resources, everything in their homes and their infrastructures that allow Europeans and Americans and Canadians was built on slavery and genocide of 7 billion people. Where in China, it was what they have today, which has already surpassed all of Europe and the United States and growing, is built on win-win cooperation. And so that's an actual basis with which to build a future, right? And so that's also important. And it's also the basis with which to build a country that contains COVID, right? So anyway, that's something that, people got to think about more, right? I mean, not to say you got to think about how many cases you have or you don't have, but the failure. Let's look at the Germany COVID, right? This is another example, right? This is a failure. It's called, Germany is near the U.S. levels, but Germany has 3 times less people, so that's not good. That's not good at all, right? So you got to look into what is causing this failure, right? And this is more than the medical, the pandemiological, the economic, the social, gender and racial, and international, nation to nation relation is all interconnected, right? And so that's another thing that has to all be solved at the same time. It's not like, well, we're gonna get socialism and then we'll figure out. It's like you don't really have time to get. You have to address. You don't have time to get the socialisms, and then for the working class. Let's not talk about race. Let's talk now about gender. Like you're not gonna. You have to really rapidly. People need to be building whatever they have to be building in their mutual aid organizations, in their local organizing with the people that are most oppressed. Obviously, indigenous people on their territories, water protectors, etc. Abolishing toxic prisons, etc. With BP and all these people, because without Canada is not doing good. Without addressing all things simultaneously, you're not really going to address any one of them individually, right? It's a kind of a similar thing, right? Without collective action, and collective action on the collective assortment of problems, you cannot address any one of the problems, right? So I often talk about decompartmentalization means undoing that. So anyways, but I'm like way off the topics. So back to the end of the stream. I just wanted to go a little bit in the hard numbers. So that people are like, what do you mean? You're making shit up. No, that's how many deaths the U.S. have. That's how many, China. I mean, that was just one day, right? It was 1 million versus 4,000. And also I want to emphasize that it was Hawaii. The 1 million deaths were not inevitable. The successes in Hawaii were replicated by China. So I want to say that like the successes of eradicating pandemics were done in Hawaii, right? Using universal healthcare and lockdowns and vaccination, right? Which we followed. And we had a large Asian population. Hawaii was 60% plus Asian and Hawaiian, Asian and Pacific Islander. And so the hygiene practices also were already better than Western white places. So that also helped to slow down the plague, because we did have less immunity, natural immunity, but that's why we vaccinated, right? So anyway, and so again, the COVID death totals past 900,000. Yeah. So anyways, and just more, you want more on data on that. So the COVID pandemic is still here. It's still killing, disabling, causing far more permanent damage to children and adults than most people realize. So you are not catastrophizing, being irrational, overwhelmed with COVID anxiety. If you feel like you're the only person wearing masks and and following the rules and trying not to go to places where everyone's unmasked and in enclosed spaces, etc. You are not. You are just being rational, and you're being the Egon amongst a bunch of non-scientific people. But you should keep doing that, because we're gonna need people who are capable of actually doing science to survive, to rebuild. Because this is in this moment, everyone's gaslighting everyone. I mean, all sides of the aisle are gaslighting everyone. Medical providers, news articles, families, and friends will try to convince you otherwise, but they are wrong. Let science guide your decisions and actions. This is part of the problem, right? This is a doctor saying we live in a complete diseducation system, because everyone, your family, your friends, your doctors, some doctors, your government, your businesses, your fellow coworker, everyone's going to be wrong. If you had a functioning, rational society, that would not be the case. But you don't have one. You got to just survive the fucked up one. So, anyways, so yeah, that's why I have decided to do this Resident Evil stream. Is I didn't actually just want to talk about why Billie Eilish's character shows up in Resident Evil, and have bloody face on my screen for the whole time, but I did have an not ulterior motive. I just want the stream to stay up, so I can't say all those things in the front. But Resident Evil, I mean, if you like zombie shows, I would recommend you check it out. I mean, it's not the best show ever. It's a zombie show, But I think people are giving it extra bad rap. I mean, Mila Jovovich. I watched most of the Mila Jovovich Resident Evils, and it's not really any worse or better than those. It's just another zombie show. I did like the fact that, as I said earlier, I like the fact that they start the show in Mexico, and they go after U.S. corporations and biolabs and the U.S. government, as it is being complicit within the first 10 minutes. I mean, that was pretty. I thought that was a bold move, you know, and you know, it's not really directly dealing with COVID. I think COVID comes up in the show at some point, but it's like people being lied to about the scale and the problems of diseases is a major point of Resident Evil. So it's really a kind of appropriate. If you can handle zombie shows, it's kind of appropriate to the moment, because not because we have like literal zombies like that walking around eating your brains, but it's a time in which there's a lot of lies from all parties in the Western world, in the capitalist world, about what's happening. And a lot of this is incredible malfeasance. It's causing massive death and massive suffering, just like the guy says in the beginning. This is hurting so many people and children. And we're a lot of people who are in the know are kind of in a really hard place. We just saw my cousin came yesterday, and I was really sad because I was like, he was visiting from, you know, thousands of miles away in the North Turtle Island or North America continent. And I was like, I couldn't see him. We had to both wear masks, and we couldn't really hang out, and, you know, in the way, you know, we just had to wear masks and talk, you know. And I was like, sorry you came so far. We can't really join you for much, but we're all immunocompromised. We're being really strict about this. And we exchanged. I gave him some sweet potatoes that we're growing, Okinawan sweet potatoes, and he gave us some stuff. But it was like, yeah, sorry, but it's like, but he's like, well, I understand because I know some people take it very seriously. My uncle and aunt, they're like not masking, flying on a plane, and we gotta go meet them tomorrow. I'm like, oh my god, we have to like lecture them about, please wear your mask on the plane. You freaking boomer, like, you know, or, you know, just person who's not taking this seriously. So it's like, it is. I mean, so I'm trying to. If you are somebody who has been taking the pandemic seriously, despite your coworkers, your family, your friends, people around you, as earlier, sooner or later, recently or a long time ago, giving up on it, and you feel like everyone in your workplace, everyone in your social space is all like going to clubs and just partying unmasked and going on, you know, vacations, and everyone's just like, screw it. Nobody's masking around you, even though you ask them. Know that you are in the right, and you are like this unfortunate black girl who does a lot of really cool chainsawing of zombies. You're surrounded. I mean, don't chainsaw everyone around you. That's what I'm saying. You're surrounded by people who are like, have brain infection of Western brain poison disorder. Now you don't have the T virus. You just have like the brain virus of incorrect information disorder, right? Or whatever, or selfishness disorder or something. But you are still in the right to try to survive the pandemic, the mind pandemic, right, of information, and also the brain fog pandemic and the COVID pandemic. So just keep doing that. I think Big Teal is like laughing out. I said, yeah, I'm not saying don't go to your neighborhood and chainsaw people. That would be a violation of the TOS to say that anyone should do that, and also that'll be super illegal. I feel like that should be obvious, but just in case, never, just don't touch chainsaws. You know, that's dangerous. Anyways, unless it's like your job, you're like a lumberjack or whatever. Anyways, okay, as good a place as any to end. But, you know, I'm gonna quickly do this quick ad. Consider, if you appreciate what we have been sharing here, consider supporting us at the Silver Spook. There's a Ko-Fi link. Yeah, if you want more, also if you want more about the history of Hawaii socialist country that built and inspired, or built socialism and also inspired China, and Sun Yat-sen specifically, the father of modern China. There's a lot more on my Silver Spook guy Twitter handle. And where's my Ko-Fi link? Yeah, you can also support us at ko-fi.com/silverspook for the education. Consider, how much is it worth? Like $3, $5, $10. You know, if you didn't learn anything, you don't have to give us anything. But or at patreon.com/Neofeud, because that's an ongoing way to support us. And it really does. We do really appreciate and actually require the support, because without it, we can't keep doing these streams, because we won't have electricity and internet and all that, and roof and stuff like that. So consider supporting us if you have the disposable income. Thank you very much. And also, We're gonna watch quickly this little trailer, and then we're gonna end the stream shortly after that. But this is a trailer for Neofeud, which is back on sale. So if you've been like, "Oh, Source, I just missed a sale," guess what? It's on sale again. It's not. It's just a Neofeud sale. But I'll be right back.
The Illuminati they wanted to build a god with their own hands, and instead they created us.
Just because I'm made of silicone and aluminium, I must be doing something wrong. That's machine stereotyping, that is.
That's reality, that is. Machines are second-class citizens.
Humans are sentient persons by default, ma'am. They have personhood parity.
There are thousands upon thousands of overqualified slum dwellers. You are my peon. Don't you get it?
This wasn't a job. It was always just an excommunication sentence.
We're pawns in a feud bigger than we can imagine. Turn the cogs of the machine before Leviathan grinds you up and swallows you and yours.
We don't get to choose our hand, comrade. Prince, peon, rich, poor, human, robot.
I invented the crux of the royal's power, the secret to consciousness, our existence itself, the meaning of life.
I'm the $6 billion baller. Have some trouble, youth.
You are my greatest creation of all.
Now I had to build my own family. I hate your son. I hate your son.
I'm happy to smash all of the crowns and throw the gold shards down to the people. I will be the iconoclast queen.
But who makes you queen anyway? You? You in whose army, princess? You in whose army?
Okay, anyway, so yeah, that's the game. Don't forget, that game just went on sale. If you don't like capitalism, imperialism, racism, the prison or police and military industrial complex, and all those kind of terrible stuff, and you like science fiction and comedy games for some weird reason, consider checking out Neofeud, which is, yes, on sale right now. And somebody, I think Big Till, you asked if I made the music. I did also make the soundtrack. If you like the soundtrack for Neofeud, you can also get the Neofeud soundtrack. That's in that trailer and other music. There's 45 tracks that I made. It's like 2.5 hours of music. This is one of the biggest musical endeavors I've ever gone on, but I also made the music for the game as well as the art, the writing, and the programming for it. So that is up there on Bandcamp. I'm actually about to put out a new album. That's going to be the first time I've kind of done like a fully produced album in a while. I made a bunch of albums that are just kind of like, I made up some songs and then took the recordings of the songs, but I'm like actually like putting like orchestrating the drums, bass, guitars, and effects for a new album coming very soon as well. But also, you can check out Neofeud on Steam. It is on sale. It is also a game that is, if you can leave even a very short review, if you had a chance to play it, massively appreciated. Helps us to get the game discovered. Like Disco Elysium with more cyberpunk characteristics, or like Detroit Become Human, but not made by some white dude from a giant AAA capitalist entity. Neofeud is a basically, I did the game. It's a labor of love, but also work that I need to keep on getting some economic reimbursement for. As I actually calculated it was about $150,000 worth of labor if I was working full time at a game company, and we haven't got close to that. So, but you know, if you have a second to pick it up, it is massively appreciated. It is a game. Everything I talk about on these streams, it kind of comes up in the game in an entertaining, adventure, satirical, science fiction format. So consider doing that. And also, you can also get Neofeud on itch.io for Windows, Mac, and Linux. It's on sale there as well. And it's also a game that you can get with the maximum revenue going to the creators on itch. If you want, and you can pay as much as you want when you get it there. Also, consider checking out Decolonators. If you know Luna Oi, our Vietnamese comrade. Speaking of countries that have suffered biological and chemical warfare, right? Speaking of Resident Evil, Vietnam is a place where the U.S. dropped thousands and thousands of pounds of chemicals and fire, including Agent Orange, and caused terrible effects and mutations. Actually, I think a lot of the zombie and mutation and all that kind of stuff comes from. I mean, if you ever seen like the actual impact of those chemical and biological weapons on people in Asia, it's just it's horrible stuff. It's horrible. I mean, don't look at it unless you want to have nightmares, and it's very terrible and sad. But anyways, Vietnam is a place that was impacted by United States chemical and biological warfare, and you can play a Vietnamese communist woman kicking capitalist colonizer butts in Decolonators for the low price of $3, made with native Hawaiian and Vietnamese leftists. So, yeah. I mean, I put together the art and the programming and everything, and Luna voiced the main character and helped me with the research. So, anyways, check out Decolonators. Also, there's a book. Woman is a book by my partner Holly Argent by a woman raised in right-wing evangelical Protestant Christianity, and it is not a historical retelling, but a work of fiction. Speaking of the Jordan Petersonian types, I got all these Jordan Peterson ads now that I made that video about Jordan Peterson and the page. I'm like, oh shit, what have I done? The algorithm thinks I'm some kind of Jordan Peterson stan now. I keep getting these ads to defeat the Chaos Dragons. Listen to me speak. I don't want to listen to you speak, evil Kermit. Anyways, but this is a book that's about dunking on people like that, basically. And also it's a book that's 2,000 words or less. You can read it really quickly. You can get it for free, or you can also support us by throwing some money our way as well. And also you can check out at Patreon. I already said you can help us out at patreon.com/Neofeud to keep us going with keeping all of the roof above the head and the electric and the lights and vehicles functioning and with the energy to move, etc. And all the other material conditions met. Help us at patreon.com/Neofeud. Follow us at Silver Spoon Games at octodon.social or Silver Spoon Games at mastodon.social. The first one for my personal takes, the latter for the game stuff for on Mastodon, a decentralized, non-capitalist, open source platform. While we have access to the Death Star satellites, because as long as I don't get in trouble for dunking on U.S. biological weapons usage and Victoria Nuland and all their horrible biological weapons labs they have all over the planet with racist, genocidal intention, you can follow at Silver Spook Guy, and I can learn when the streams go on sale and my personal takes on things like why I think the U.S. hasn't really abolished slavery by admitting that they need cheap prison labor to have their white communities. Anyways, so you can follow also Silver Spook Games for the games related stuff, like Neofeud and the games when they go on sale, other games that come out, and updates about that kind of thing. Yeah, and you can also follow Terminus C. Terminus C is Terminus Cyberstar. It is a low poly cyberpunk immersive sim in the vein of 90s games like Deus Ex and System Shock 2, and it is a cyberpunk RPG game. And Terminus C is also completed with the exception of art optimization and content testing. So, I'm the lead writer and content director on this. So, if you like the things that I do on the streams, this game is all about that kind of thing. Actually, one of these games, speaking of universal healthcare, one of the main missions, I think one of my favorite missions in this game is called Universal Death Care. And it's where you try to survive American healthcare system and not get killed by it. You play a homeless, illegal immigrant trying to survive a more science fictional version of America. Let's put it that way. So it's definitely not I do not pull punches. You might be able to tell that when you listen to the streams. Sometimes if I feel like extra nice, I'll just punch you with maybe like 2,000 pounds of force instead of 6,000. But anyways, on the nose, up your nose, deep inside of your nostril cavities. Anyways, so Terminus Cyberstar is a game that you can follow. Join the Discord if you want to learn more about that. Also, you can follow Holly at the Tech Fairy, is mod VA and partner at the Silver Spook Cooperative here at Silver Spook Hui, and producer and writer for Kane Nix's Zion Attack, The Summoning, which also is a show called The Lounge, or now this season is The Summoning. and it is a show Holly produces, musical media and miscellaneous mischief for misfits and monsters and ACAB. I may actually be making a game for this show at some point in the future. And Kate Nix also plays the Wicked Witch of the Western imperialist world, Tina Thatcher, the Margaret Thatcher-like character in Decolonators. So also that. And Magic Storytime is a show Holly mods for a live stream magic show on Twitch. And Holly is primary caregiver and also primary administrator here at home manager here at the Silver Spook household. And yes, tweeting important things like this. And you can also follow. This is a newer account. I'm trying to make sure we keep spreading this around. Limahana was on Luna Oi's channel recently, and Limahana is a Hawaiian socialist person and Marxist-Leninist, I believe, but also is spreading aloha and communism, and just started a channel that you can check out to learn more about what's going on and the history of Hawaii as well. I don't see a link there. But anyways, trying to find a video here. Okay. Let me just. Okay. Yeah, there you go. So you can follow the channel, subscribe to the channel over here. Yeah. It's just Limahana, and it's there's 2 videos so far. I think there's gonna be more coming, and so yeah, that'll be a channel that has a lot more content related to Hawaii, socialism, history, as a left Native Hawaiian person doing content creation. So do check that out. Also, you can follow. Let's see. You can follow account_1983. You can follow. Okay, well, maybe you can't. Oh yeah, what? Oh, there it is. I was like, you can only follow Kamala. Positive Synergy is another Native Hawaiian trying to do sharing education on stopping the desecration and the various parts of Hawaii, Red Hill, poisoning of the water, and doing various land back activities, and had also made the album Perfecting Perfection, which is music and songs about all of these important issues that, of course, that's what we're all about, is ending all of this toxic stuff, stopping Resident Evil, stopping, military poisoning evil, and Resident Evil biological warfare in Hawaii, including please don't fly here. Please don't fly here right now. Especially right now, we got huge Omicron surge, and we don't need more people flying here because planes are the number one way you can get. I mean, if you absolutely have to, otherwise you're going to be homeless or something like that because you got a job or you're like a medical emergency worker that needs to help people with COVID. Please don't fly here for fun. Please don't fly here generally because we don't need Resident Evil. We don't need Resident Evil here, okay? We would like to avoid zombie apocalypse here. Anyways, or COVID mass COVID plague spread here. So anyways, that is the end of the stream. Until next time, keep your mirror stage polished. Be excellent to each other. Always get just get your shotgun rounds ready. Make sure you watch out for the liquor. Watch out for the tyrant. Zombies, unless they're rage zombies, they can only usually walk 1 to 2 miles per hour, so you can probably outrun them. Do your cardio though. Do your cardio, just like everyone in the movie The Warriors, which we watched last night. Just running everywhere. Run. Do your cardio. Carry your chainsaw, and wear your mask. Get a vaccination. Please social distance. Okay. All right. The end.